Hey everyone, welcome back. We're building a Minecraft survival base while I tell you about someone who found hotel receipts with their sister's name all over them. And trust me, this is just the beginning of the chaos. Because what started as suspicious hotel bills turned into a family implosion that nobody saw coming, with twists that'll make you wonder how anyone thought they'd get away with this in the first place. So let's dig into this mess. Before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been tuning in, leaving comments and supporting the channel. Your support means the world. It truly makes a difference. Alright, let's get into it. I was doing laundry on a Tuesday afternoon when my entire life fell apart. Sounds dramatic, but that's genuinely what happened. I grabbed Mark's gym bag to throw his workout clothes in the wash, and something crumpled fell out of the side pocket. Hotel receipts. 3 of them, actually. At first, I figured it was a work thing. Mark travels sometimes for his job. Regional manager for a tech company. Conferences, client meetings, the usual corporate stuff. But then I looked closer at the dates. These weren't from business trips. They were from nights he'd told me he was working late at the office. Nights I'd eaten dinner alone, watched Netflix by myself, gone to bed before he got home. My stomach dropped. But that wasn't even the worst part. Every single receipt listed a second guest, and the name on all 3 receipts was Emma. My sister, Emma. I sat on the bathroom floor holding those pieces of paper, trying to make them say something different, trying to find an explanation that didn't involve my husband and my sister betraying me in the most cliché way possible. Maybe it was a different Emma. Maybe there was some reasonable explanation I wasn't seeing because I was panicking. But I knew. Deep down, I already knew. I didn't confront Mark first. I called Emma, told her I needed to see her immediately. She tried to deflect, said she was busy. Could we do it later this week? I told her it was about the hotel receipts. The line went silent for a long moment. Then she said she'd be at my house in 20 minutes. She showed up looking like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She walked into my living room and just stood there, not even trying to sit down. I held up the receipts and waited. Emma started crying before I said a single word. Not the delicate, pretty crying you see in movies. Full body sobbing, mascara running down her face, gasping for breath between words. She told me everything. They'd been seeing each other for 8 months. Started at a family barbecue where Mark had apparently pulled her aside and confided that our marriage was falling apart. That I was emotionally abusive. That I was planning to leave him anyway, and he was just trying to cope with the loneliness. The fact that she believed him was almost as painful as the affair itself. Emma said she thought she was helping him through a difficult time, that their connection felt real. That Mark had promised he'd tell me everything once he figured out how to handle the divorce without destroying me. She actually used those words, without destroying me. Like having an affair with my sister for 8 months was somehow the compassionate choice. I asked her how many times, how many hotel rooms, how many lies. She said she didn't know, too many to count. They'd meet up whenever Mark claimed to be working late, sometimes during his lunch breaks, once when I was visiting our mum in the hospital after her surgery. That one hit different. I'd been sitting by our mother's bedside while my husband was sleeping with my sister. I told Emma to stay right there. Then I called Mark, told him he needed to come home immediately. He tried to argue, said he was in the middle of something important at work. I told him Emma was at our house and we needed to talk, all 3 of us. He went quiet, then he said he'd be there in 10 minutes. He walked through the door looking calm, too calm, like he'd been expecting this conversation and had already prepared for it. He sat down on the couch across from Emma and me, folded his hands in his lap and waited. I held up the receipts and asked if he had anything to say. He looked at them, looked at me, looked at Emma, and then reached into his messenger bag, pulled out a manila folder, slid it across the coffee table toward me. Divorce papers, already drawn up, already signed by him, and listed right there as his witness, Emma's name. This is where patience finally snapped. I started laughing, not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of the moment had broken something in my brain. My husband had been carrying around divorce papers, waiting for the right moment to hand them to me, while sleeping with my sister, and he'd been so sloppy about hiding the affair that he'd left receipts in his gym bag like some kind of subconscious breadcrumb trail. Mark finally spoke, said the receipts weren't an accident. He'd left them there on purpose because he was too much of a coward to start this conversation himself. He wanted me to find them, wanted me to confront him, wanted the decision to be taken out of his hands so he could play the victim who got caught instead of the person who actively chose to betray his wife. You almost have to admire that level of cowardice. Emma was still crying. Mark was staring at his hands. And I was sitting there holding divorce papers that had apparently been ready to go for weeks, while I'd been completely oblivious to the fact that my marriage was already over. I asked Mark when he decided our marriage was done. He said about a year ago, before Emma, before the hotels. He'd just checked out emotionally and then Emma happened, and it seemed easier to lean into that than to do the hard work of either fixing our marriage or ending it honestly. At least he was finally being truthful about something. I signed the papers right there. Didn't even read them thoroughly. Didn't negotiate. Didn't fight. Just signed my name and slid them back across the table. Told them both to get out of my house. Emma tried to apologize again. I told her we were done, not just as sisters-in-law, as sisters. She'd made her choice and I was making mine. They left together. I watched them walk to their separate cars and drive away in different directions. Wondered if they'd meet up later to comfort each other about how difficult this must have been for them. But Sarah's story doesn't end with those papers, though. What she found next made the hotel receipts look like nothing. I went upstairs to pack up Mark's stuff, started going through his dresser, his closet, his nightstand. That's when I found his second phone, hidden in a shoebox in the back of our closet. The phone he'd apparently been using to coordinate the affair. I turned it on. No password. Just open right up to months of text messages between Mark and Emma, but also messages with other women. 3 other women. Women I didn't know. Women whose names I'd never heard. All of them thinking they were having some kind of special connection with Mark. All of them believing his lies about his terrible wife and his difficult marriage. Emma wasn't special. She was just the one stupid enough to be related to me. I screenshotted everything. Every conversation. Every lie. Every promise Mark had made to multiple women simultaneously. Then I sent it all to Emma with a simple message. You weren't the only one. You were just the most convenient. She didn't respond. I also sent the screenshots to Mark's phone with a note. I'm keeping this as insurance. If you make the divorce difficult, everyone you work with will know exactly who you really are. He didn't make it difficult. The divorce went through quickly, no contest. He got his freedom and I got the house and most of our savings because his lawyer apparently advised him that fighting would only make things worse. Emma tried to reach out a few times. Text saying she was sorry, that she'd made a mistake, that she hoped we could eventually repair our relationship. I blocked her number, blocked her on every social media platform, told our mum the truth about what happened. Mum was horrified, cut Emma off too, said what she did was unforgivable. Last I heard, Mark and Emma aren't even together anymore. Apparently once the thrill of sneaking around was gone, they realized they had nothing in common except mutual selfishness. Mark's dating someone new now. Emma's alone. I genuinely don't care about either of them. I'm doing better than I expected. Therapy helped. Time helped. Realizing that their betrayal said everything about their character and nothing about my worth helped most of all. I've started dating again. Nothing serious yet. Just remembering what it feels like to be with someone who actually respects me. Those hotel receipts were supposed to destroy me. Instead, they freed me from a marriage that was already dead and a sister who was never really on my side. Mark thought leaving them in his gym bag was his cowardly way of forcing a conversation. Turns out it was the best gift he ever gave me, a clear, undeniable reason to walk away without guilt. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this night is just getting started. But speaking of phones revealing everything you didn't want to know, I never thought a software update would be the thing that destroyed my relationship. But here we are. It was a Tuesday night, completely unremarkable. Tyler and I were sitting on the couch, both scrolling on our phones like the millennial cliches we were. My iPhone had been bugging me about an update for days, so I finally gave in and let it do its thing. Tyler's phone was charging on the coffee table. We both upgraded our devices around the same time, both had the same carrier, and we'd set up some family sharing thing months ago for a music subscription. I honestly barely remembered doing it. The update finished. My phone restarted, and then things got weird. First, it was a text notification, but not from anyone in my contacts. It just said, "Baby, can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that cologne I like." I stared at it, confused. I definitely didn't send that. I opened my messages and my stomach dropped. There were entire conversation threads I'd never seen before. Texts with someone named Kendra. Texts with someone saved as baby with a heart emoji. Texts with his mum that mentioned Kendra like she was a permanent fixture in his life. My hands went numb. I looked over at Tyler, who was completely absorbed in some video on his phone, laughing at something, completely oblivious. Then came another notification, a calendar alert. Date night with Kay, 7 p.m. at that Italian place downtown. Tonight, right now actually, in about 40 minutes. I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of glitch. But then the voicemail started syncing. I watched in real time as they populated my phone. I clicked on one at random. A woman's voice, warm and familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. "Hey babe, just wondering when you're coming home. I picked up that wine you like. Love you. Coming home." Like they lived together. Like she was waiting for him in their home. I excused myself to the bathroom, grabbed my laptop on the way, and locked the door. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might actually throw up. I connected my phone and started screen recording everything. Every message, every calendar event, every voicemail. I went through months of texts between Tyler and Kendra. Pet names, inside jokes, photos of them together that he'd never posted publicly. Plans for a vacation next month that I definitely wasn't invited to. Then I found the text between Tyler and Baby, who apparently was also a real person, not just Kendra under a different name. Another full relationship. More photos, more plans, more promises. This man was living an entire separate life, maybe two separate lives, and I'd had no idea. I sat on the bathroom floor going through everything with this detached clinical focus. Part of me was screaming, but the logical part had taken over. I needed evidence. I needed to understand the full scope of this before I did anything. So I kept scrolling, kept recording, kept cataloging every lie. There were texts to Kendra about me, about Jessica, the girl he was helping out by letting her crash at his place sometimes. Just a roommate situation, nothing serious. He told her I was going through a tough time and he was being a good friend. Meanwhile, he told me Kendra was his cousin who was in town temporarily for work. His cousin. I'd felt bad for her, this fictional woman struggling to find her footing in a new city. The betrayal was so layered it was almost impressive. Almost. I found texts where he juggled both of our schedules, carefully making sure we never overlapped. Date nights on different days, weekend trips planned around each other's availability. He'd told me he worked late Tuesdays and Thursdays. Turns out those were his nights with Kendra. He'd told me he had early gym sessions Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Those were his mornings with the other woman. This level of organization had to be exhausting. He'd basically been running 3 separate lives, like a part-time job. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that Tyler knocked on the bathroom door asking if I was okay. I told him my stomach was upset. I'd be out in a minute. My voice sounded normal. Steady. I surprised myself with how calm I sounded. Here's where it gets absurd. I created a group chat. Added myself, Tyler, and Kendra. I used the number from all those texts, the one saved in my phone now thanks to whatever cosmic sync had happened. I didn't say anything at first, just started sending screenshots, the text between Tyler and Kendra, the calendar events, the voicemails, everything. I sent them rapid fire, one after another. Then I added a simple message. "Hi Kendra, I'm Jessica. I think we need to talk about Tyler." My phone immediately started ringing. Tyler. I silenced it. It rang again. Silenced. A text from him. "What the hell are you doing?" Not even a question mark, just accusatory panic. Then Kendra started typing. The little dots appeared and disappeared like she was writing and deleting, writing and deleting. Finally, a message came through. "Who is this?" I replied. "I'm Tyler's girlfriend." Or I was. Apparently he told you I was his roommate. The dots appeared again, longer this time. Then, he told me you were his roommate, that you were just friends. I actually laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that echoed off the bathroom tiles. I texted back. He told me you were his cousin visiting for work. Tyler was calling both of us now. I could see the notifications lighting up my screen. Kendra wasn't answering either. We just kept texting each other, comparing notes in real time, while Tyler's world imploded in the living room. Kendra sent me a photo, her and Tyler at what looked like an apartment I'd never seen before. She asked, "Do you know where this is?" I didn't. She sent the address. She said, "This is our apartment. We've lived together for 2 years. 2 years. I'd been dating Tyler for 18 months, which meant he'd moved in with Kendra, then started dating me, then apparently picked up a third woman somewhere along the way. The timeline was actually making me dizzy. I heard Tyler outside the bathroom door. His voice was different now, panicked, pleading. "Jess, please, let me explain. There's been a mistake. My phone glitched or something." I ignored him, asked Kendra if she wanted to meet. She said yes immediately. I finally opened the bathroom door. Tyler was standing there, and I'd never seen him look like that before. Pale, sweating, desperate. He tried to grab my hand, and I just stepped around him, grabbed my bag, and walked out. He followed me to my car, talking the whole time. It wasn't what it looked like. He could explain everything. I was overreacting. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove to the coffee shop where Kendra had agreed to meet me. Tyler called 17 times during the 15-minute drive. I blocked his number halfway through. Kendra was already there when I arrived. I recognized her from the photos. She was pretty, looked put together, seemed normal. She looked as shell-shocked as I felt. We sat down across from each other, and for a minute neither of us said anything. Then she laughed, just a short, disbelieving sound. She said, "I thought I was losing my mind." He was so convincing. We compared stories. She'd met Tyler 3 years ago. They'd been dating for 6 months before moving in together. She thought they were solid, planning a future, maybe getting engaged soon. She'd noticed he was gone a lot, but he said it was work. Said he was trying to get a promotion, putting in extra hours. She'd been proud of him for working so hard. Meanwhile, he'd told me he lived alone, that he was focused on his career, that he liked having his own space. I'd respected that, thought it was mature. The third woman, the one saved as baby, neither of us knew much about. But based on the texts, she was newer. Maybe 6 months in. Tyler had a type, apparently, and a system. Kendra and I sat there for 2 hours, piecing together his entire operation. The lies were so intricate, so carefully maintained. He'd created whole fictional narratives for each of us. Different friend groups, different family situations, different versions of himself. Then Kendra said something that shifted the whole conversation. She said, "I'm on his bank account, joint checking, have been for a year." I looked at her, she looked at me, and we both smiled. Not happy smiles, the kind of smiles that mean someone's about to have a very bad day. We drained it, not out of spite exactly, more like compensation for emotional damages. Kendra transferred her half to her personal account, which was completely legal since her name was on it. She took every penny she was entitled to. Tyler had a few thousand in there, not a fortune, but enough to sting. Then we both blocked him, on everything, phone, social media, email, complete radio silence. Kendra texted the other woman, baby, and told her everything, sent her screenshots, the whole story. I don't know if she believed it or if she stayed with him. Honestly, I stopped caring. The next few days were surreal. Tyler tried everything. He showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer. He sent emails from different accounts. I filtered them all to spam. He even tried to contact me through a mutual friend, feeding them some story about a misunderstanding. The friend called me. I told them the truth. They stopped being his friend pretty much immediately. Kendra and I stayed in touch, not like we became best friends or anything, but we'd check in with each other, make sure he wasn't harassing either of us. She moved out of their apartment within 2 weeks, broke the lease, didn't care about the penalty, said it was worth it to never see him again. I heard through the grapevine that Tyler tried to explain everything away as a mental health crisis, that he'd been confused, struggling, didn't know what he was doing. Nobody bought it. You don't accidentally maintain 3 separate relationships with military precision because you're confused. That takes planning, intention, deliberate, calculated lying. The thing that still gets me is how normal he seemed. There were no red flags I could point to in hindsight, no suspicious behavior that I missed. He was just good at compartmentalizing, good at lying, good at making each of us feel like we were the only one. It's been 6 months now. I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm dating again, casually. Taking things slow, learning to trust my gut again, even though my gut completely missed this situation. Kendra's doing well too. She's seeing someone new, someone who actually respects her. As for Tyler, last I heard he moved to a different city, probably starting fresh with a whole new set of lies for a whole new set of people. Part of me wants to warn them, whoever they are. But that's not my responsibility anymore. The irony is that if it weren't for that random software sync, I might still be with him. Might have wasted years on someone who saw me as a part-time character in his elaborate fiction. So in a weird way, I'm grateful for the glitch, grateful for the truth, even though it was devastating. Technology really has a way of exposing liars, but sometimes the betrayal isn't digital at all. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, right in your own home. I never thought cleaning out my grandmother's attic would turn into the kind of thing that splits a family in half. But here we are. My grandmother passed away 3 months ago. She was 87, lived a full life, loved her garden and her mystery novels and her two daughters, my mom and my Aunt Linda. We were all grieving, but in that functional way where you keep moving because sitting still means falling apart. So when my mom asked me to help sort through grandma's things, I said yes. Honestly, I thought it would be therapeutic. Go through old photo albums, maybe find some vintage clothes, cry a little, move on. The attic was exactly what you'd expect. Boxes stacked on boxes, everything labeled in my grandmother's precise handwriting. Christmas decorations, tax records from the 70s, my mom's old report cards, Aunt Linda's college textbooks. We were making good progress, creating piles for keep, donate, and trash. Then I found the shoebox. It was wedged behind an old trunk covered in dust, like someone had deliberately hidden it where it wouldn't be easily found. The box itself was nothing special, just a plain brown shoebox that probably once held a pair of sensible flats. But on top was an envelope, sealed with actual wax, like something out of a period drama, and written across the front in my grandmother's handwriting were the words, "To be opened by my daughters only." I called my mum over. She called Aunt Linda. They both stood there staring at this envelope like it might explode. My grandmother had been dead for 3 months. What could possibly be so important that she'd hidden it away like this, but so secret that she never told them about it while alive? Mom opened it with shaking hands. Aunt Linda read over her shoulder. I watched both their faces go completely white. The letter was dated 2 years ago, right after my grandfather died. Grandma's handwriting was shakier than usual, but still readable, and what it said changed everything we thought we knew about our family. In 1968, when my grandmother was 19, she had a baby, a daughter. She gave her up for adoption before anyone in her family knew she was pregnant, before she met my grandfather, before she became the woman we all knew. The letter explained everything: how she'd gotten pregnant by a boyfriend her parents disapproved of, how they'd sent her away to a home for unwed mothers, how she'd held her daughter once, named her Margaret, and then signed the papers that gave her away. She'd spent the rest of her life looking for her, hired private investigators in the 80s, registered with every adoption reunion database, put her name on every list, but she never found her. And now she was gone, and she was asking her daughters to finish what she started. The letter included the name of the adoption agency, a photo of baby Margaret, and a handwritten plea. Please find her. Please tell her I never stopped loving her. Please tell her I'm sorry. My mum started crying. Aunt Linda just stood there looking like someone had reached into her chest and rearranged her organs. I felt like an intruder, watching them process the fact that their mother had carried this secret their entire lives. The thing is, my grandmother was always so composed, so proper. She went to church every Sunday, hosted book club, volunteered at the library. The idea of her as a scared 19-year-old giving up a baby felt impossible. But there it was, in her own handwriting, asking for forgiveness she'd never be able to receive. Mum became obsessed almost immediately. I'm talking spreadsheets, phone calls, late nights on ancestry websites. She hired a private investigator within the week. A good one, expensive, the kind who actually finds people instead of just taking your money. Aunt Linda was more hesitant, kept saying maybe they should think about this. Maybe Grandma had her reasons for keeping it secret. But Mom was determined. It took the investigator 6 weeks to find her, Margaret, who now went by Janet, living 2 towns over, working as a third-grade teacher, married, 2 kids of her own, completely ordinary life. The investigator sent photos. Janet looked like my grandmother. Same nose, same smile, same way of tilting her head in pictures. It was undeniable. Mom wanted to reach out immediately. Aunt Linda convinced her to slow down, to think it through, to maybe send a letter first instead of just showing up. So Mom wrote this long, emotional letter explaining everything. Who they were, who their mother was, what the letter said. She sent it with copies of the original letter and the photo. Janet responded within 3 days, said she'd love to meet them, suggested a coffee shop halfway between our towns. She sounded warm in her email, maybe a little cautious, but genuinely interested in connecting. The day of the meeting, Mum was a wreck. Changed outfits 4 times, practiced what she was going to say, brought a whole photo album of family pictures to show Janet her history. Aunt Linda and I came for moral support. We got to the coffee shop early, sat in a corner booth, and waited. Janet walked in exactly on time. She was 57, looked like she did yoga, had kind eyes. She hugged my mom and Aunt Linda like they were old friends, which made Mom start crying again. We ordered coffee, made small talk, and then Janet said something that shifted the entire energy of the room. She'd known about us for 15 years. That's when everything unraveled. Janet explained it so calmly, like she'd been preparing for this conversation for years. When she turned 18, she'd requested her adoption records. Took her a few years to work up the courage, but she eventually tracked down my grandmother's information. Found her address, her phone number, everything. She was 25 when she finally wrote her a letter. A simple, hopeful letter saying she didn't want to intrude, but would love to meet her birth mother if she was open to it. My grandmother wrote back, told her never to contact her again, said she had a family now, daughters who didn't know about her, a life she'd built, said that Margaret, now Janet, should respect that and stay away. The letter was cold, clinical, like she was rejecting a sales pitch instead of a daughter. Mum looked like she might throw up. Aunt Linda actually gasped. I just sat there trying to process what this meant. Janet said she'd honored the request, stayed away, built her own life, but she'd kept tabs from a distance. Knew when my grandfather died, knew where we all lived. She'd driven past my grandmother's house once, just to see it, but never stopped, never reached out again. And then, years later, after my grandmother died, here we were. Her daughters holding a letter their mother wrote, after guilt had apparently consumed her, begging them to find the daughter she'd rejected decades earlier. The irony was so brutal it was almost funny. Almost. Janet wasn't angry, though. That's what got me. She said she'd made peace with it years ago, understood that her birth mother had her reasons, that it was complicated, that people make choices. She'd had a good life, loving adoptive parents, her own family. She didn't need anything from us, but she was willing to get to know us if we wanted that. Mum asked why she agreed to meet if she didn't need closure. Janet said because she was curious, because meeting her birth mother was impossible now, but meeting her half-sisters wasn't, because maybe understanding where she came from would fill in some gaps, even if those gaps had stopped hurting years ago. We ended up talking for 3 hours, swapped stories, compared photos, found weird little similarities. Janet's daughter looked exactly like my mum did at that age. She had the same weird sense of humor as Aunt Linda. It was surreal and painful and kind of beautiful all at once. But here's where it gets complicated. After the meeting, Mum wanted to integrate Janet into the family immediately, invite her to holidays, introduce her to everyone, make up for lost time. Aunt Linda thought we should go slower, let Janet set the pace, and Janet herself seemed content with occasional coffee dates and nothing more. The bigger issue was how we felt about Grandma. Mum felt betrayed, angry that Grandma had rejected Janet and then expected them to fix it after she was dead. Aunt Linda argued that people change, that guilt is real, that the letter was Grandma's attempt at redemption. I didn't know what to think. How do you honor a dead woman's regret when the living woman she hurt doesn't even want the apology? It's been 4 months since that first meeting. We've seen Janet a handful of times. She's nice, easy to talk to. But there's this wall there, this distance that probably won't ever fully go away. She has her life. We have ours. And Grandma's ghost sits between us, complicating everything. Mom still struggles with it. Some days she's angry at Grandma for being a coward. Some days she defends her, says it was a different time, that Grandma was young and scared. Aunt Linda mostly stays quiet about it. And Janet just keeps living her life, occasionally sending us photos of her grandkids, showing up for coffee when we ask, but never pushing for more. I think about that letter a lot, about how Grandma carried that guilt for decades, but still turned Janet away when she had the chance to make it right, about how people can be so many contradictory things at once, good mothers and terrible mothers, loving and cruel, regretful but still too proud to actually fix things while they're alive. The family is different now, not broken exactly, but permanently altered, like we're all walking around a hole in the ground that we only just discovered was there. Some of us want to fill it in, some want to build a bridge over it, and some, like Janet, have already walked around it and moved on. I don't know what the right answer is. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe this is just what happens when secrets come out too late, when the person who could have fixed things is gone and everyone left behind has to figure out what forgiveness looks like when the person who needs forgiving is already dead. Family secrets have a way of snowballing, and speaking of DNA bombshells that destroy everything, my college graduation was supposed to be one of the best days of my life. 4 years of late nights, stress, and way too much ramen, and I'd finally made it. My whole family came. Parents, sister, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. We had this big party at my parents' house afterward. Catered food, a cake with my face on it that was simultaneously touching and horrifying. The whole deal. Everything was perfect until my Uncle Ron got drunk. Uncle Ron was my dad's younger brother, and he had this habit of thinking he was funnier than he actually was, especially after a few beers. He'd been making jokes all afternoon, mostly harmless stuff about my major, or my terrible teenage haircut in the photo slideshow. But then, right when my dad was giving this really nice speech about how proud he was, Uncle Ron interrupted. He said, and I quote, "You know, it's funny how Marcus doesn't look anything like you, Dave. Must have gotten all his mum's genes." Then he laughed like he'd just delivered the setup to the world's greatest punchline. The room went completely silent. My mum's face drained of color, just completely white, like someone had hit pause on her. My dad stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting from confused to something I'd never seen before, something cold and angry and hurt all at once. He put down his glass, didn't say a word, and walked out of the house, just left his own son's graduation party without looking back. My mum tried to follow him, but he got in his car and drove away. Uncle Ron, suddenly very sober, started apologizing, saying it was just a joke. He didn't mean anything by it. My grandma told him to shut up. The party kind of dissolved after that. People made awkward excuses and left. Within 30 minutes, it was just me, my mom, and my younger sister Kayla sitting in a living room full of half-eaten food and decorations that suddenly felt really depressing. I asked my mom what that was about. She said Uncle Ron was just drunk and stupid, that Dad would cool off and come home. But she wouldn't look at me when she said it. And Kayla, my sister, who usually never shut up, was just sitting there staring at her hands. Then Kayla started crying. Not like sad crying, but that panicked, guilty kind of crying where you know someone's about to confess something terrible. She told us she'd taken a DNA test, one of those ancestry things. She'd done it 6 months ago, mostly out of curiosity, wanted to see the ethnicity breakdown, maybe find some distant cousins, normal stuff. But when the results came back, something was off. The test showed Dad as a close relative, but not as her father, more like an uncle. She'd spent months trying to figure out what it meant. If maybe the test was wrong, if maybe there was some weird genetic thing she didn't understand, but deep down she knew what it meant. My mom just sat there listening to Kayla explain all this, and the look on her face confirmed everything. That's when I knew Uncle Ron's drunk joke had accidentally hit on the truth. I looked at my mom and asked her directly, "Is Dad not our father?" She didn't answer right away, just sat there crying silently, wringing her hands. Then finally she said yes. Well, no, he wasn't our biological father, but he was our dad in every way that mattered. He'd raised us, loved us, been there for every school play and soccer game and parent-teacher conference. I felt like the floor had disappeared, like I was falling but still sitting in the same chair. I asked her who our biological father was. She said his name was Michael, Dad's best friend from college. They'd had an affair that lasted about a year. She'd gotten pregnant with Kayla first, then me 16 months later. Michael died in a car accident when I was 3. I vaguely remembered him. Or at least I remembered a guy who came around a lot when I was really little. I'd always assumed he was just a family friend. Here's where it gets absurd. Dad had known about the affair. Mom had confessed it to him right after Michael died, consumed by guilt. But he hadn't known about the paternity. He'd suspected, especially with Kayla, who apparently looked exactly like Michael. But he'd never asked, never pushed for the truth. He'd made a choice to forgive my mom and move forward and raise us as his own. For over 20 years, he'd just decided that we were his kids, and that was that. And now, because of Uncle Ron's idiotic comment and Kayla's DNA test, the truth was unavoidable. Dad didn't come home that night, or the next night. He checked into a hotel and wouldn't answer anyone's calls except to text that he needed time. Mum was a mess. Kayla blamed herself for taking the test. I was just numb, trying to process the fact that my entire identity had shifted in the span of an hour. I tried calling Dad after a few days. He finally answered. His voice sounded tired, defeated. I told him nothing had changed, that he was still my dad, that biology didn't matter, all the things I thought I was supposed to say. He said he appreciated that, but everything had changed for him. He'd spent 2 decades choosing not to know, and now he couldn't unknow it. Every time he looked at us, he'd see Michael, see the affair, see the lie he'd been living with. I asked if there was anything I could do to fix this. He said no. It wasn't my fault, wasn't Kayla's fault, but he couldn't just pretend everything was fine. He'd built his entire adult life on a foundation that turned out to be false, and he didn't know how to reconcile that. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes. By the end, I understood that I'd lost my dad. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. The man who raised me couldn't look past the biology anymore. Things deteriorated fast after that. Mum and Dad tried counseling for about 2 weeks before Dad said he was done. He wanted a divorce. Mom moved out first, went to stay with her sister. Dad put the house up for sale, said he couldn't live there anymore with all the memories. Kayla stopped talking to Mum entirely, blamed her for everything, which was fair but also heartbreaking to watch. I tried to stay neutral, tried to maintain relationships with both of them, but it was exhausting. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. The house sold within a month. Dad moved to a different state, took a job transfer he'd been offered years ago, but always turned down because of us. He calls sometimes, birthdays, holidays, but it's not the same. The warmth is gone. We're just people he used to know. Mum tried to explain herself a million times, said she'd been young and stupid and unhappy, said the affair was wrong but that Kayla and I were never mistakes, said she'd lived with the guilt every day and had genuinely thought taking the secret to her grave was the right choice. Maybe it would have been. Maybe if Kayla never took that test, if Uncle Ron never made that joke, we'd still be a family. But that's not what happened. The worst part is how normal it all seemed before. We weren't a perfect family, but we were solid. Sunday dinners, inside jokes, traditions. I had absolutely no idea any of this was lurking beneath the surface. Looking back, I can't even find the cracks. No weird tension, no suspicious moments. Just a normal family living a normal life built on a secret that eventually exploded. It's been 8 months. My mom lives alone now in a small apartment. Kayla's in therapy trying to deal with the guilt of being the one who technically exposed everything. Dad has a new girlfriend already, which stings more than I want to admit. And me? I'm just trying to figure out who I am now, that my origin story has been completely rewritten. I don't talk to Uncle Ron anymore. He sent an apology text a few weeks after the party. I never responded. Part of me knows it's not his fault. The truth would have come out eventually. Kayla's DNA test guaranteed that, but I still associate him with the moment everything fell apart. Sometimes I wonder about Michael, my biological father who I barely remember. I've looked him up online, found old photos, tried to see myself in his features. It's weird, like looking at a stranger who's somehow responsible for my existence. Mum offered to tell me more about him, but I'm not sure I want to know. He's been dead for most of my life. Learning about him now won't change anything. The family isn't coming back together. That's the reality I've had to accept. No dramatic reconciliation, no heartfelt forgiveness, no return to normal. We're just separate people now, connected by shared history and legal documents and not much else. My graduation party was supposed to mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I guess it did, just not in the way anyone expected. The chapter that ended wasn't college. It was the chapter where I had a family, and the one that began is me figuring out how to build a life in the aftermath of that loss. People keep asking me if I'm okay. I tell them I am. Most days that's even true. But every now and then something happens, something small like seeing a father and son at the grocery store, and I remember what I lost. Not just a dad, but the belief that the people who love you will always find a way to keep loving you, no matter what. Turns out that's not always true. Sometimes love has limits. Sometimes the truth is more than people can forgive. And sometimes a drunk uncle's bad joke is all it takes to destroy everything you thought was permanent. Some families shatter in private. Others, they implode in front of everyone they know. I've been to a lot of weddings. I've seen best men forget their speeches, flower girls refuse to walk down the aisle, and one memorable incident where someone objected during the ceremony as a joke. But I've never seen a wedding implode quite like my brother Jake's did. And the worst part? It was completely accidental. Jake's wedding was beautiful. He married his college sweetheart Amy at this gorgeous vineyard. Everything was perfect. The ceremony went off without a hitch. The food was amazing. People were dancing. It was one of those weddings where you could feel how much love was in the room. Everyone was happy. Everyone was having a good time. Then came the speeches. The best man went first, told some funny stories about Jake in college, made everyone laugh. Amy's maid of honor went next, cried a little, talked about true love, standard wedding speech stuff. Then it was Jake's turn. He stood up with his glass of champagne, looking a little tipsy and a lot emotional, and started thanking people. He thanked Amy's parents for raising such an incredible daughter, thanked his groomsmen for standing by him, thanked Amy for saying yes. And then he turned to our parents, sitting at the head table looking proud, and said something that made the entire room go silent. He said, "Thank you for staying together for us kids, even when things got hard. Thank you for showing me what commitment looks like. Thank you for fighting through that rough year when Dad moved out, but came back because you both knew family was more important than pride." I watched my younger sister Claire's face change in real time. Confusion, then understanding, then something that looked like betrayal mixed with rage. She was sitting 3 tables away from me, and I could see her hands start to shake. She stood up, chair scraping loud against the floor, and walked straight out of the reception hall. Jake kept talking, completely oblivious, finished his speech to polite applause, sat back down, kissed his new wife, had no idea he'd just detonated a bomb in the middle of his own wedding. I followed Claire outside, found her in the parking lot, pacing between cars, breathing hard like she was trying not to hyperventilate. When she saw me, she just said, "Did you know?" I nodded. I was 12 when Dad moved out, old enough to understand what was happening. Claire was 7, and apparently they'd told her Dad was working abroad for 6 months. A work assignment. Completely normal. Nothing to worry about. She'd believed them. Why wouldn't she? She was 7 years old. She didn't question why Dad never video called, why we never visited him, why Mom cried a lot that year. She just accepted the explanation and moved on with her life. 20 years. They'd kept this lie going for 20 years. Claire wanted to confront them right then, but I convinced her to wait until after the ceremony, after Jake and Amy left for their honeymoon. No point in ruining his wedding over something he didn't even know was a secret. So she came back inside, sat through the rest of the reception with this frozen smile on her face, and waited. The second Jake and Amy drove away, Claire cornered our parents in the parking lot. I stood nearby, not quite part of the conversation, but close enough to hear everything. And honestly, I wanted answers too. I'd known about the separation, but I'd never known why. Our parents had always been vague about it. Just said they had some problems, worked through them, came back stronger. Turned out there was a lot more to the story. Mum started crying almost immediately. Dad looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth came out. Dad had a gambling problem. Not like casual weekend poker, like serious, compulsive, destroying our family's finances gambling. By the time Mum found out, he'd drained their savings, maxed out credit cards, taken out loans against the house. The separation wasn't just about needing space. It was Mom kicking him out and threatening divorce if he didn't get help. The 6 months he was supposedly working abroad, he was in rehab, gambling addiction treatment, living in a facility 2 hours away, working through his issues, trying to become someone who could be trusted again. He came back different, got into therapy, joined support groups, handed over all financial control to Mum. They rebuilt slowly, paid off the debts over years, and they never told us kids the full story because they were ashamed, because they wanted to protect us, because they thought some lies were kinder than the truth. Claire was shaking. She asked what else they'd lied about, what else they'd decided she was too fragile to handle. Were there other secrets, other convenient omissions? Mum swore there wasn't anything else. Dad just stood there looking broken, and Claire just shook her head and walked away, got in her car and left. The thing that got me was how reasonable their logic probably seemed at the time. Claire was 7, too young to understand addiction and financial ruin and adult problems, so they simplified it, told her a version of events that wouldn't traumatize her. And then the lie just continued because bringing it up later would mean admitting they'd lied in the first place. But from Claire's perspective, her entire family had conspired to treat her like a child for 2 decades. Everyone knew but her. Jake knew. I knew. Probably cousins and aunts and uncles knew. Everyone had been in on this secret except the one person it most affected. The next day, Claire posted in a family support subreddit. I know because she sent me the link with a message that just said, "Since everyone likes to talk behind my back anyway." The post laid out everything. The wedding speech reveal, the parking lot confrontation, the gambling addiction she never knew about. And it ended with her declaring she was cutting off the entire family for treating her like she couldn't handle the truth. The comments were split. Half the people said she was overreacting, that her parents were trying to protect her, that she should be grateful they worked through their problems instead of divorcing. The other half validated her anger, said she had a right to feel betrayed, that lies by omission are still lies. I didn't know what to think. Still don't really. Because I understand both sides. Our parents made a choice to protect a 7-year-old from something heavy and traumatic. But they never adjusted that choice as Claire got older. Never sat her down at 15 or 18 or 25 and said, "Hey, there's something you should know about our family history." Jake felt terrible. Called me the morning after his wedding, hungover and devastated. He'd had no idea it was a secret. He thought Claire knew, thought everyone knew. His wedding night was apparently spent consoling Amy while he spiraled about accidentally destroying his relationship with his sister. Mom and Dad tried reaching out to Claire. Calls, texts, emails. She ignored all of it. Changed her relationship status on social media to not listing family members. Unfollowed everyone. Complete radio silence. It's been 3 months. Claire hasn't spoken to any of us. She missed Thanksgiving. Says she's not coming to Christmas. Mom's a wreck about it. Dad's back in therapy. Jake still feels guilty even though it genuinely wasn't his fault. And I'm stuck in the middle, understanding everyone's perspective but unable to fix any of it. The gambling thing explains a lot in retrospect. Why we never went on expensive vacations. Why Mum was so strict about budgeting. Why Dad never went to casinos even for charity events. I just thought they were financially conservative. Turns out they were rebuilding from rubble. Part of me wonders if Claire's anger is really about the lie, or about feeling like the baby of the family who never got to be part of the real conversations. Like everyone else graduated to adult status, and she got left behind in the kids' table version of our family history. I tried talking to her once. She answered, which surprised me, but she was clear. She wasn't cutting me off personally. She was cutting off the dynamic, the family system that decided she couldn't handle truth. And until someone acknowledged how messed up that was, she was done. I asked if she'd accept an apology. She said she didn't want an apology. She wanted acknowledgement that what they did was wrong, not just a "sorry you feel that way." She wanted them to understand the difference between protecting a child and infantilizing an adult. I relayed that to our parents. Dad got defensive, said they made the best choice they could with the information they had. Mum said maybe they should have told her sooner, but they didn't know how. Neither of them seemed to understand what Claire actually wanted. And maybe that's the real problem. They're still trying to manage her feelings instead of just being honest about their own mistakes. Still treating her like someone who needs to be handled carefully instead of a grown woman who deserves the full truth. Jake's wedding photos came back last week. They're beautiful, but there's this one shot of the reception, taken right after his speech. You can see Claire in the background, standing up to leave, and if you look close enough, you can see the exact moment her face changes. The exact moment she realizes her family has been lying to her for most of her life. The photographer asked if we wanted that one removed from the album. Jake said no, said it was part of the day, part of the story, part of the truth. At least that family secret came out by accident. But when someone weaponizes information on purpose, that's when things get truly ruthless. Breaking up with Caleb was one of the easiest decisions I ever made. Dating him was the mistake. The breakup itself was messy, sure, but necessary. He cheated, lied about it, gaslit me when I confronted him, and then acted like I was the villain for being upset. Classic manipulation playbook. I told him we were done, blocked him on most platforms, and tried to move on with my life. That lasted about 2 weeks before he started his campaign of petty revenge. First, it was sub-tweets, vague posts about crazy exes and how some people can't handle the truth. I ignored those. Then he started liking and commenting on my old posts, leaving passive-aggressive remarks that his friends would amplify. Still ignored it. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. But then he escalated. He sent me a message on the one platform I hadn't blocked him on yet. Just screenshots, no words. Just images of our private text conversations, the kind of messages you send when you think you're in a safe relationship. Vulnerable stuff, rants about my job, complaints about my family, insecure moments where I'd asked if I was pretty enough, or if he still loved me. All the raw, unfiltered things you say to someone you trust. And at the bottom of that message he wrote, "Thought people should know who you really are. Posting these tomorrow unless you apologize. Apologize for breaking up with him, for having the audacity to leave after he cheated. The entitlement was genuinely breathtaking. My first instinct was panic. Those messages were private, embarrassing, taken completely out of context. But then I took a breath and actually thought about it. What was in those messages that was really that bad? Me being human. Me having feelings. Me venting to my boyfriend about normal life stress. And then I remembered what was in his messages. See, I'm the kind of person who backs things up. Always have been. Lost too many photos to broken phones as a teenager. Learned my lesson. So I had backups of everything, including every text Caleb had ever sent me. Including the ones where he admitted to sleeping with my former best friend Jenna. Including the ones where he bragged about faking sick to skip work while still getting paid. Including the ones where he casually mentioned taking money from his parents' safe to fund his gaming habit. All time-stamped, all saved, all ready to go. I replied to his message with 4 words, "Do whatever you want." Then I spent the evening organizing my own screenshots, made sure everything was clear, readable, had context. I wasn't going to just dump a mess of images. I was going to tell a story, his story, in his own words. Caleb posted my messages the next morning, made this whole thread on Twitter about toxic people and fake personalities, posted screenshots of me complaining about my boss, about my mom being overbearing, about feeling insecure, framed it all like I was this terrible, ungrateful person. His friends retweeted it, started adding their own commentary about how they always knew I was problematic. I waited exactly 30 minutes. Let him think he'd won. Let his post get some traction. Then I posted mine. I started with the cheating texts, the ones where he told Jenna that I was boring in bed and he needed someone more adventurous. The ones where they made plans to meet up while I was visiting my sick grandmother. I posted those with a simple caption, "Since we're sharing private messages now, thought I'd contribute to the conversation." Then came the screenshots about work. Him bragging to his friends about calling in sick when he just wanted to play video games. Him laughing about how easy it was to fool his boss. I tagged his employer in that one. Figured they might find it interesting. Then the money stuff. Text conversations where he casually mentioned taking a few hundred here and there from his parents' emergency fund. Where he joked about them being too old to notice. Where his friends asked if he felt bad, and he said his parents owed him for his terrible childhood, which was rich considering they'd paid for his entire college education. I posted it all methodically, one thread at a time, each one responding to his original post. And I tagged everyone relevant, his job, his parents, his new girlfriend who I'm sure had no idea about Jenna, even some of his friends who'd been commenting on his post about me. The internet works fast when it smells blood in the water. Within an hour, his post was getting ratioed into oblivion. People were quote tweeting him, pointing out the irony of him trying to expose someone while being exponentially worse. His new girlfriend commented on one of my posts asking if this was real. I sent her the full, uncropped screenshots privately. She thanked me and then very publicly dumped him in his replies. His friends started deleting their supportive comments. Some even apologized to me. His post went from having hundreds of supportive replies to being a graveyard of deleted tweets and people calling him out. But that wasn't even the worst part. His employer saw the screenshots, the ones where he admitted to fraud, essentially, lying about being sick to collect paid time off. They fired him within 48 hours, posted some corporate statement about integrity and company values. Caleb tried to claim the screenshots were fake, but the timestamps matched up perfectly with days he'd called in sick. He had no defense. His parents saw the screenshots about the money. Turns out they had noticed some cash missing and had been trying to figure out where it went. Now they had their answer. His mum called him out in a Facebook comment that I absolutely should not have enjoyed as much as I did. She said they'd raised him better than this and were considering pressing charges. I don't know if they actually did, but the threat alone seemed to destroy him. Within 3 days, Caleb had deleted everything. His original post, his Twitter account, his Instagram. Just completely vanished from social media. But the internet is forever, and plenty of people had screenshots. His attempt to ruin me had backfired so spectacularly that he'd ruined himself instead. Then came the apology text. Long, rambling, pathetic, about how he'd made a mistake, how he was going through a hard time, how he never meant for things to get this out of hand. He asked if I could delete my posts, if we could both just move on and forget this happened. I left him on read, not out of cruelty exactly, more like there was nothing left to say. He'd tried to weaponize my vulnerability and ended up exposing his own corruption. He'd tried to destroy my reputation and ended up destroying his own life. What was I supposed to say to that? It's okay. I forgive you. I didn't forgive him. And it definitely wasn't okay. The thing is, I never wanted it to go that far. If he'd just left me alone after the breakup, none of this would have happened. I would have moved on, he would have moved on, and his life wouldn't have imploded. But he made a choice. He decided that hurting me was more important than moving forward. And he severely underestimated how much ammunition I had. People asked me afterward if I felt bad about ruining his life. Honestly, not really. I didn't ruin his life. I just showed people who he already was. The cheating, the lying, the stealing, those were his choices. I just made sure those choices had consequences. My posts stayed up for about a week before I deleted them. Not because I regretted posting them, but because I was done. The point had been made. Caleb had been thoroughly humiliated. Keeping them up felt like overkill at that point. Life moved on surprisingly fast after that. I got a few messages from mutual friends, apologizing for not believing me about the cheating initially. Jenna tried to reach out, probably to do damage control, but I blocked her immediately. Some people from high school I hadn't talked to in years slid into my DMs to say they always knew Caleb was trash. It was weird and validating and exhausting all at once. Caleb got a new job eventually, something in retail from what I heard through the grapevine. His parents made him pay back the money in installments. His social media comeback was quiet. Private accounts only, no more public posting. He learned his lesson the hard way. I learned something too, that standing up for yourself doesn't make you the bad guy, even when someone tries to paint you that way. That keeping receipts isn't paranoid, it's smart. And that sometimes the best revenge isn't some elaborate scheme. Sometimes it's just letting someone's own actions speak for themselves. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Maybe that makes me petty. Maybe that makes me vindictive. But Caleb tried to humiliate me publicly, and all I did was show people the truth. If the truth ruins your life, that's not my fault. That's yours. These days, I'm doing fine. Dating someone new, someone who doesn't require me to keep backup files of incriminating evidence just in case. Someone who treats me with actual respect. It's wild how good a relationship can be when it's not built on lies and manipulation. As for Caleb, I genuinely hope he's learned from this. Hope he's become a better person. But honestly, I don't think about him much anymore. He's just a cautionary tale now, a reminder that trying to destroy someone else usually says more about you than it does about them. And if anyone else out there is dealing with an ex threatening to leak your messages, here's my advice. Back up theirs first. You never know when you might need to remind someone that glass houses and thrown stones don't mix well. Revenge is a dish best served with receipts, but sometimes betrayal doesn't come from an enemy. It comes from the person you trusted most. I found out my best friend was sleeping with my fiancée, the way most people do in 2025. Through technology betraying someone at exactly the wrong moment, or maybe the right moment, depending on how you look at it. Brandon had left his laptop open on the kitchen table. He was in the shower, I was making coffee, and a message notification popped up on the screen. From Ashley, my best friend since sophomore year of college. The message preview said, "Last night was amazing. I love you." I stood there holding the coffee pot, staring at those words, trying to make them mean something other than what they obviously meant. Maybe it was a different Ashley. Maybe it was some kind of inside joke I didn't understand. Maybe I was having a stroke and hallucinating. I wasn't hallucinating. I opened the laptop, didn't even feel guilty about it. Just clicked into their message thread and scrolled. 6 months of messages. 6 months of "I miss yous" and "can't wait to see yous" and explicit details about their hookups that I'm not going to repeat here because I'd like to keep some shred of dignity. They'd been sleeping together since New Year's. We'd all gone to the same party. I'd gotten food poisoning and left early. Apparently they'd stayed and kept staying together every chance they got after that. Brandon came out of the shower and found me sitting at the table with his laptop. He knew immediately, didn't even try to play dumb, just stood there in his towel looking guilty and pathetic and said, "I can explain." I told him to get out. He tried to talk, tried to apologize, tried to tell me it didn't mean anything. I just kept saying, "Get out," louder each time until he finally grabbed some clothes and left. Then I called Ashley. She answered on the second ring, all cheerful. "Hey babe, what's up?" Like we were still friends, like she hadn't spent half a year systematically destroying my life while pretending to be my person. I asked her if it was true, if she'd been sleeping with Brandon. There was this long pause, and then she sighed, like I was inconveniencing her, like I was being dramatic. She said yes, it was true. Said she couldn't help it. Said Brandon and I weren't right for each other anyway. That she could tell I wasn't appreciating him. That they'd fallen in love and she wasn't going to apologize for following her heart. I hung up on her. Sat there in my kitchen trying to process the audacity. She'd stolen my fiancé, betrayed our entire friendship, and somehow made herself the romantic heroine of the story. I called off the wedding that day. Sent a message to everyone on the guest list. Weddings cancelled, relationships over, please don't ask questions. Lost the deposit on the venue. Didn't care. Started the messy process of untangling a life I'd built with someone who'd been lying to me for months. Ashley texted me a few times, said she hoped we could still be friends eventually, said what she and Brandon had was real, and she hoped I could be happy for them. I blocked her number, but that wasn't even the worst part. 2 weeks later, Ashley started posting on Instagram. Couple photos with Brandon, cute captions about finding unexpected love. And here's the thing that made my blood boil. She kept tagging our usual hangout spots, the coffee shop near my apartment, the park where I ran every morning, the bookstore I went to every weekend, like she was rubbing it in my face. Like she wanted me to see her living her best life with my ex-fiancé. I tried to ignore it, tried to take the high road, but every notification felt like a slap. Every photo was a reminder that she'd taken something from me and was now parading it around like a trophy. So I made a choice. Maybe not the most mature choice, but definitely the most satisfying one. Ashley's parents were ultra-conservative Christians, the kind who'd sent her to Christian summer camps and made her wear purity rings and expected her to wait until marriage. Ashley had spent most of her adult life carefully managing what they knew about her. She'd tell them she went to church every Sunday when she actually slept in. She'd edit her social media so they couldn't see the party photos. She'd constructed this entire false version of herself to maintain their approval and, more importantly, their financial support. She told me everything over the years, every secret she was keeping from them, every lie she'd carefully maintained, because that's what best friends do. They trust each other with the truth, and now I was going to weaponize that trust. I created a burner email account, gathered screenshots, wrote a very polite, very detailed email to her parents explaining some things they should probably know about their daughter. I told them about the abortion she'd had last year, sent them screenshots of texts where she'd asked me to go with her to the clinic, where she'd talked about the procedure, where she'd said she was grateful her parents would never find out. I told them she hadn't been to church in over 3 years, sent screenshots of Sunday morning texts where she talked about being hungover, about sleeping in, about how she just told them she went to service to keep them happy. And I told them she was currently dating a married man, because technically Brandon's divorce from his first wife wasn't finalized yet when their affair started. It was a messy detail he'd glossed over when we met, said it was basically done, just paperwork. But legally, still married. And to Ashley's parents, that made Brandon an adulterer and Ashley a homewrecker. I sent the email and felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no hesitation, just cold satisfaction. The fallout was nuclear. Ashley's parents called her immediately. I know because she posted a frantic Instagram story asking if anyone had contacted her parents about her personal life. Then she deleted it. Then she deleted all the couple photos with Brandon. Then she went completely silent on social media. 3 days later, her dad posted on Facebook a long, sanctimonious message about how they'd raised their daughter with Christian values, how disappointed they were to learn she'd strayed so far from God's path, and how they could no longer support someone who refused to live according to their family's principles. Effective immediately, they were cutting her off financially and emotionally until she repented and changed her ways. It was brutal, public, exactly the kind of humiliation Ashley had spent years trying to avoid. Things went from bad to unhinged. Ashley showed up at my apartment 4 days after the email. I was home, heard pounding on my door, looked through the peephole, and saw her standing there looking absolutely unhinged. Hair messy, eyes red, practically vibrating with rage. She was screaming through the door, calling me every name she could think of, saying I'd ruined her life, saying what I did was evil and vindictive and unforgivable, saying her parents had disowned her, cut off her rent payments, cancelled her credit cards, told her entire extended family she was a sinner and a disappointment. I just stood on the other side of the door listening, didn't open it, didn't respond, just let her scream until she ran out of steam. When she finally stopped, there was this moment of silence. Then she said, quieter now, almost pleading, "How could you do this to me?" We were best friends. I spoke through the door, told her she should have thought about that before sleeping with my fiancé. Then I walked away, turned up my music, and let her pound on the door until building security made her leave. I blocked her on every platform I could think of: email, phone, social media, Venmo, complete scorched earth. If she wanted to contact me, she'd have to send a carrier pigeon, and even then I'd probably ignore it. Did I feel bad? Not even a little bit. Ashley made her choices. She chose Brandon over our friendship. She chose to flaunt their relationship in my face. She chose to betray someone who trusted her with everything. And I chose to show her that actions have consequences. Brandon tried to reach out too, sent me a long apology text about how he'd made a mistake, how things with Ashley were falling apart now that the excitement was gone, how he wanted to try again. I deleted it without reading past the first line. Last I heard, Ashley moved back in with her parents after all. Apparently they agreed to let her stay if she attended church with them and went to counseling with their pastor. She deleted all her social media, disappeared from our mutual friend group, became a ghost. Some people said I went too far, that what Ashley did was terrible, but what I did was cruel, that I should have just moved on instead of burning her entire life down. But here's the thing, I did move on. Sending that email took 10 minutes. After that, I focused on myself, started therapy, traveled, reconnected with friends I'd neglected, built a life that didn't revolve around a man who didn't respect me or a friend who'd never actually had my back. Ashley's the one who couldn't move on, who kept poking at me with those Instagram posts, who thought she could have it all with no consequences. I just gave her what she'd been asking for, my attention, just not the kind she wanted. No regrets, not a single one. Scorched earth, sometimes it's the only language people understand, but revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like quietly gathering evidence. I found the first camera by accident. I was dusting our bedroom, something I'd been putting off for weeks, and when I moved the picture frame on David's nightstand, I saw it. A tiny lens, barely visible, tucked behind the frame at an angle that pointed directly at our bed. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just a weird reflection or a screw or something. But I looked closer, moved the frame completely, and there it was. A small camera, professionally hidden, the kind you'd see in a spy movie. My stomach dropped. I didn't scream or freak out or confront David immediately. Something told me to stay quiet, to think, to figure out what was happening before I made a move. So I put the frame back exactly how it was and started looking around the house. I found the second one in the living room, disguised as a phone charger plugged into the wall near the couch. The third was in the kitchen, hidden inside a smoke detector. The fourth in our home office, tucked into a bookshelf. The fifth in the hallway, mounted in what looked like a thermostat, but definitely wasn't. 5 cameras, 5 different rooms, all positioned to capture every move I made in our house. I felt sick, violated, but also confused. David and I had been married for 6 years. We had a 4-year-old daughter. Our marriage wasn't perfect. We'd been arguing more lately, but I never saw this coming. Why was my husband filming me in our own home? I waited until David took our daughter Emma to his mum's house for the afternoon. Told him I had a headache and needed to rest. The second his car pulled out of the driveway, I went to his office. His laptop was password protected, but I knew the password. He'd never changed it from our anniversary date, which in hindsight was either sentimental or lazy. I found the cloud storage account within 10 minutes, months of footage, organized by date and location. Kitchen camera, bedroom camera, living room camera. I started watching, and the sick feeling in my stomach got worse. This wasn't some creepy voyeur thing. David wasn't watching me for some disturbing personal reason. He was documenting me. Every time I left the house, the timestamp was noted. Every time I had a friend over, he'd labeled the file with their name. Every time I put Emma in front of the TV so I could make dinner or take a shower, there was a note about neglectful parenting. The file names killed me. Meeting with attorney, evidence of absence, proof of neglect. And then I found the folder labeled divorce case, and everything clicked into place. David was building a case against me for a divorce I didn't even know was coming. More specifically, for a custody battle where he planned to paint me as an unfit mother. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. The man I'd married, the father of my child, had been secretly surveilling me for months, logging my every move, twisting normal parenting moments into evidence of negligence. All so he could take Emma away from me. The footage he'd collected was insane. Me leaving the house to run errands, labeled as abandonment. Me letting Emma watch cartoons while I folded laundry, labeled as using TV as a babysitter. Me having coffee with my friend Rachel, labeled as prioritizing social life over parenting. Everything twisted, everything framed in the worst possible light. And here's where it gets absurd. There were notes in the files, David's own commentary on the footage, things like subject leaves, child unattended for 12 minutes, or subject allows child to eat non-organic snacks. He was narrating my life like I was some kind of science experiment, like our marriage was the investigation and I was the suspect. I found emails to his attorney, drafts of custody arguments, a timeline of events he'd fabricated to make me look unstable. He'd even logged the time I cried after an argument we had, labeling it as emotional instability and potential mental health crisis. This man had been planning to destroy me while sleeping next to me every night, while kissing me goodbye every morning, while playing happy family at Emma's preschool events. I could have confronted him right then, could have lost it, deleted everything, smashed the cameras. But I didn't, because I was angry, sure, but I was also thinking clearly for maybe the first time in months. And I realized that David had just handed me the biggest mistake of his life. I closed the laptop, put everything back exactly as it was, and called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The best divorce attorney in our city, someone my friend had used and raved about. Her name was Catherine, and when I explained what I'd found, she actually laughed. Not a happy laugh, more like a "this guy is an idiot" laugh. She explained that what David was doing was completely illegal. Recording someone in their home without consent especially in private areas like bedrooms and bathrooms, violated wiretapping laws in our state. The footage he'd collected wasn't just inadmissible, it was criminal evidence against him. Everything he thought he was building to use against me in court was actually going to destroy his own case. Catherine told me to act normal. Pretend I knew nothing. Let David keep filming, keep collecting his illegal evidence. Meanwhile, she'd file for emergency custody, a restraining order, and we'd use his own surveillance system against him. So that's what I did. I went back to my normal routine, made dinner, played with Emma, smiled at David when he came home, let him think his plan was working. Meanwhile, Catherine was preparing paperwork that would blow his entire scheme apart. The hardest part was pretending, sitting across from David at dinner, watching him interact with Emma, knowing what he was planning. He'd ask about my day, and I'd answer cheerfully, knowing he was probably reviewing footage later to see if I'd done anything he could use against me. It was like living with a stranger, or worse, living with someone I'd never actually known at all. 2 weeks later, David was served with papers at his office, emergency custody hearing, restraining order, and a lawsuit for illegal surveillance. Catherine had documented everything, every camera, every file, every twisted interpretation of normal parenting. We had screenshots, we had his emails to his attorney, we had his own notes condemning him. David came home that night and I was already gone. Catherine had advised me to stay with my parents until the hearing, to remove myself from the situation entirely. I'd packed bags for me and Emma, taken everything important, and left. When David walked into our empty house, all he found was a copy of the restraining order on the kitchen counter. He tried calling, texting, emailing. All of it went to my lawyer. He tried to spin some story about the cameras being for home security, about being worried about break-ins, but his own file names and notes contradicted that. Hard to claim you're worried about burglars when your files are labeled divorce evidence and attorney meeting. The custody hearing was 3 weeks later. David showed up with his lawyer looking confident, probably thinking he still had some ace up his sleeve. Then Catherine started presenting evidence. Photos of the hidden cameras, transcripts of his notes, his own emails planning to use the footage against me. The look on his face when he realized what was happening was something I'll never forget. The judge was not amused. Turned out judges really don't like it when one parent illegally surveils the other while planning a custody battle. They especially don't like it when that surveillance happens in bedrooms and private spaces. David's lawyer tried to argue that his client was just being thorough, just trying to protect his daughter. The judge shut that down immediately. I got full custody. David got supervised visitation only. 1 day a week, 3 hours, with a court-appointed supervisor present. The judge also ordered him to pay for all my legal fees and imposed a fine for the illegal surveillance. And just to make it extra clear, the judge warned that any further attempts to record or monitor me would result in criminal charges. David tried to appeal. It went nowhere. His illegal surveillance had torpedoed any credibility he might have had. No judge was going to give custody to someone who'd violated wiretapping laws and invaded their spouse's privacy so thoroughly. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I got the house, primary custody, and a restraining order that prohibited David from coming within 100 yards of me, except during supervised visitation. His entire plan had backfired so completely that he ended up with less than he would have gotten if he'd just filed for divorce normally. The thing that still gets me is how calculated it all was. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. David had planned this for months, bought the cameras, set them up, spent hours reviewing footage and making notes, all while pretending to be my husband, pretending to love me, pretending our family was normal. Emma's doing okay. She's too young to understand most of what happened. She knows Mommy and Daddy don't live together anymore, knows she sees Daddy on Saturdays with a nice lady present. As she gets older, I'll explain more. But for now, I'm just focused on giving her stability and love. I found out later that David's lawyer had actually advised against the cameras, told him it was illegal and would backfire, but David was so convinced he was smarter than everyone else, so sure he could control the narrative, that he did it anyway. Imagine being that confidently wrong. I still think about those cameras sometimes, about how violated I felt when I found them. But I also think about how his own arrogance destroyed him. He was so focused on building a case against me that he built one against himself instead. These days, I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. Emma and I have our routine. The house feels lighter without David's presence. I'm dating again, casually, taking things slow, and I'm hyper aware of my surroundings in a way I never was before. Every smoke detector gets checked, every phone charger gets inspected. Once you've been surveilled in your own home, you never quite feel the same way about privacy again. David's apparently moved on too. New apartment, new girlfriend. I genuinely hope he's learned from this disaster, though I doubt it. Some people never learn. They just find new people to control and manipulate. As for me, I learned that trusting your gut is important, that if something feels off, it probably is, and that sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone's own actions speak for themselves. David tried to paint me as an unfit mother and ended up proving himself to be an unfit father and husband. The cameras are gone now. I had a professional come sweep the house to make sure there weren't any I'd missed. All clear. But I still find myself looking for them sometimes, checking corners, inspecting objects. The paranoia lingers even when the threat is gone. But I'm safe now. Emma's safe. And David learned the hard way that trying to destroy someone usually destroys you instead. Some people plan their betrayals like military operations. Others, they don't even bother hiding them anymore. I was having the most boring Tuesday of my life when everything exploded. Just scrolling TikTok during my lunch break, half paying attention to cooking videos and dog compilations, when a live stream popped up on my feed. Beautiful mountain wedding, the caption said. The thumbnail showed this gorgeous resort with mountains in the background, string lights everywhere, that Pinterest perfect aesthetic. I almost scrolled past it, but something about the location looked familiar, really familiar. And then it hit me. That was the resort Chris said he was going to this weekend, the one where his cousin was getting married. He'd shown me photos of the place when he booked his room, complained about how expensive it was. I clicked on the live stream out of curiosity. Thought maybe I'd catch a glimpse of Chris in the background, see what the wedding looked like, kill some time before my next meeting. The stream had a few hundred viewers, someone's aunt or friend filming the ceremony from the guest section. The officiant was talking about love and commitment. The camera panned across the altar, and there was Chris, standing right there, in a full tuxedo, looking nervous and happy and completely focused on the woman across from him. Standing exactly where the groom stands. My brain just stopped working for a second. I stared at my phone screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Maybe he was the best man? Maybe he was standing in for someone? Maybe this was a different person who just happened to look exactly like my boyfriend of 2 years? Then the officiant said the groom's name, Christopher James Morrison, Chris's full legal name, the one on the lease we just signed together for our apartment. My hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. I fumbled to start screen recording, had to try 3 times before I got it working because my fingers weren't cooperating. But I got it. Started recording everything. The bride was someone I'd seen in Chris's photos before, Madison. He'd told me she was just a friend from college. Said they'd stayed in touch, grabbed coffee sometimes when she was in town, completely platonic. I'd even met her once briefly at some group dinner. She'd seemed nice, normal, not like someone who was planning a secret wedding with my boyfriend. I watched them exchange vows, watched Chris promise to love and cherish Madison for the rest of his life, watched him slip a ring on her finger with tears in his eyes. Real tears, genuine emotion. The same way he'd looked at me when we talked about our future together just last week. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. They kissed, everyone cheered. The camera followed them walking down the aisle together, both of them beaming, surrounded by families I'd never met. His mum was there, his dad, his sister who Chris called every Sunday. None of them looked confused or shocked. They all looked happy, celebratory, like this was completely normal and planned, which meant they all knew. Everyone in Chris's life knew about this wedding except me. I sat in my car in the parking lot watching this live stream, and I just felt completely numb, like my brain couldn't process the level of betrayal I was witnessing in real time. The wedding reception was starting. People were dancing. Chris and Madison were cutting a cake, doing their first dance, looking like the perfect couple. And then something in me just snapped. I looked up flights to the resort. It was only 2 hours away by plane. There was one leaving in 90 minutes. I booked it without thinking, didn't even go back to my office to tell anyone I was leaving. Just drove straight to the airport, still in my work clothes, got through security, and sat at the gate playing that screen recording over and over. I made a video montage on the flight, every photo I had of me and Chris together, our anniversary dinner last month, the weekend trip we took to the beach, him asleep on my couch with our cat, morning coffee together, all the little mundane moments that make up a relationship. Set it to some sad piano music, exported it, and had it ready to go. The plane landed. I got a rental car, drove to the resort following my GPS like I was on autopilot. It was early evening by the time I arrived. The reception was in full swing in this beautiful outdoor pavilion, still live streaming for distant relatives, I guess. I walked in wearing slacks and a blouse, carrying my purse and my phone, completely underdressed for a formal wedding. A few people glanced at me confused, probably thought I was resort staff or something. I walked straight through the reception area toward the head table, where Chris and Madison were sitting with their wedding party. Chris saw me first. I watched his face go from confused to pale to absolutely terrified in about 3 seconds. He stood up like he was going to intercept me, but I was already at the table. I didn't yell, didn't make a scene, just calmly placed my phone face up on the table in front of them and hit play on my video montage. The sad piano music started. Photos of me and Chris filled the screen. The entire reception went silent, like someone had hit a mute button. Everyone just stopped and stared. Madison looked at the phone, then at Chris, then at me. Her face crumpled. She started crying, mascara running down her cheeks. Chris just stood there frozen, mouth opening and closing like he was trying to find words that didn't exist. I let the whole video play. 3 minutes of undeniable proof that Chris had been living a completely separate life. When it ended, I picked up my phone, looked at Madison, and said the only thing I could think to say. Congratulations, he's all yours now. Then I turned around and walked out. Didn't wait for Chris to try to explain. Didn't stick around for the fallout. Just got back in my rental car and drove to the airport. I posted the whole story on Reddit from the airport terminal while waiting for my flight home. Needed to tell someone. Needed to process what had just happened. Needed confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. The responses started coming in immediately. People were horrified, supportive, asking for updates. Then came the breaking point. The wedding livestream was still going. People had screen recorded it, including the moment I walked in. Someone posted it on Twitter, then TikTok, then everywhere. The beautiful mountain wedding turned into a viral disaster. Millions of views, comment sections full of people dissecting every moment, analyzing Chris's face when he saw me, Madison's tears, the collective gasp from the guests. Chris tried calling, I blocked him. He tried emailing, blocked that too. His sister somehow got my number and called to yell at me for ruining the wedding. I hung up on her. His mum left a voicemail saying I was cruel and vindictive. I deleted it without listening all the way through. But Madison reached out, sent me a long message through Instagram. She'd had no idea I existed. Chris had told her he was single, that he'd ended his last relationship months ago. She'd met some of his friends, but they were apparently in on it, backing up his story. He'd kept our lives completely separate. Different friend groups, different social circles. He'd told me he traveled for work constantly. Told her the same thing. Used those trips to maintain both relationships simultaneously. We compared notes, realized he'd been engaged to both of us. Had proposed to me 6 months ago with a ring I was still wearing. Had proposed to Madison 8 months ago. He'd apparently planned to just keep both relationships going indefinitely. Or maybe eventually ghost one of us. We'd never know because he'd never expected to get caught. Madison called off the marriage that night. Annulment paperwork was filed within the week. I'd already moved all my stuff out of our apartment and crashed with a friend. Chris tried to contest the lease break, but given the circumstances, the landlord let me out of it. The viral video haunted him. Potential employers found it when they Googled his name. His family was humiliated. Friends took sides, most of them cutting him off entirely. Both Madison and I posted our full stories online, and the internet did what the internet does best. Made sure everyone knew exactly who Christopher James Morrison was. Last I heard, he'd moved to a different state, deleted all his social media, essentially tried to disappear and start over. Good luck with that when there are millions of views of your wedding disaster archived forever online. Madison and I aren't friends exactly, but we check in with each other sometimes. Both of us are in therapy. Both of us are doing better. She got her annulment. I got my deposit back on the engagement ring. We both got out before we legally tied ourselves to someone who saw relationships as something you could run in parallel like computer programs. People ask if I regret crashing the wedding, if maybe I should have just confronted him privately, let Madison figure it out on her own, taken the high road. And honestly, no, not even a little. That man stood at an altar and made vows to someone while actively lying to another person he'd made promises to. He deserved to have his carefully constructed double life collapse in the most public way possible. And you thought your wedding drama was bad. But let's talk about when the betrayal doesn't even wait until after the vows. I was scrolling Instagram during my lunch break when my friend Sarah tagged me in a video. She'd written, "OMG, is this Derek's twin or something, because this is wild." I clicked on it without thinking much of it. Probably just some random guy who looked like my fiancé. The video started playing, a beachside restaurant at sunset, beautiful lighting, romantic music playing in the background, a man getting down on one knee in front of a woman who had her hands over her mouth in shock. The camera zoomed in on his face and my entire body went cold. It was Derek, my fiancé of 2 weeks. He was giving a speech and I could hear every word clearly, because whoever filmed this had good audio. He said, "I knew from the moment I met you that you were the one. I've never felt this way about anyone. You make me want to be a better man. Will you marry me?" The exact same speech he'd given me 2 weeks ago. Word for word, same pauses, same emotional inflection, like he'd rehearsed it and just performed it twice. The woman in the video said yes, started crying. He slipped a ring on her finger and everyone in the restaurant applauded. The video ended with them kissing while the sunset glowed behind them. I checked the date, 3 months ago, 3 months before he proposed to me with the same speech and what looked like the exact same ring. I sat there in my car in the parking lot of my office, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Maybe it was an old video from a previous relationship. Maybe the woman was an ex and this was just coincidence. Maybe I was overreacting, but something told me to dig deeper. I clicked through to the account that posted the video. A girl named Natalie. Her profile was public, and right there in her bio, it said engaged to the love of my life with a ring emoji and a date from 3 months ago. I started scrolling through her photos. There was Derek, in her pictures from 2 months ago, from 1 month ago, from last week, Derek at brunch, Derek at a concert, Derek in what looked like a home gym that definitely wasn't at the apartment I thought we shared. My hands were shaking. I kept scrolling, found a photo from a week ago with the caption, "Can't wait to marry this man in 6 months." There were comments from her friends saying congratulations and so happy for you, and he's such a catch. 6 months, she was planning a wedding, to my fiancé, who I was also planning a wedding with. I took screenshots of everything, the proposal video, her photos with Derek, her engagement announcement. Then I did something that felt insane but also completely necessary. I messaged her. I wrote, "Hi Natalie, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need to talk to you about Derek. Can we meet for coffee?" She responded within 10 minutes. "Who is this? How do you know Derek?" I sent her a photo. Me and Derek from last month, him kissing my cheek, my engagement ring clearly visible. I wrote, "I'm his fiancé, or at least I thought I was." What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Natalie called me immediately. I answered. She was crying. She said Derek had told her about me. Said I was his toxic ex-girlfriend who kept trying to get him back. Said I was obsessed with him and wouldn't accept that we were over. He'd shown her texts that I supposedly sent. Desperate messages begging him to reconsider. Looking back, he must have faked those somehow. I told her I'd never broken up with Derek, that we'd been together for 2 years, that he'd proposed to me 2 weeks ago, that I had no idea she existed until Sarah tagged me in that video. We talked for an hour, compared stories, found so many overlapping lies it was almost impressive. He told her he worked late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those were the nights he stayed at my place. He told me he had early morning meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays. Those were the mornings he left Natalie's apartment. He'd compartmentalized his entire life. We lived in the same city but moved in completely different social circles. I was in marketing, she was a nurse. We had no mutual friends. No reason to ever cross paths. He'd engineered it perfectly. The excuses were identical. Weekend work trips that were actually weekends with the other woman. Family emergencies that bought him time. Phone calls he had to take in another room. He'd been running this double life for over a year, and neither of us had suspected a thing. Then Natalie told me something that made this even worse. She said Derek had borrowed money from her 6 months ago, $15,000, said he needed it for a business investment, promised to pay it back within 3 months. She was still waiting. I felt my stomach drop because he'd borrowed money from me too. $10,000. Same story. Business investment. Promised to pay it back. Never did. We weren't just both his fiancées. We were both his victims. Natalie and I agreed to meet in person. We picked a neutral coffee shop halfway between our places. When I walked in and saw her sitting there, it was surreal. She was pretty, seemed nice, looked as devastated as I felt. We hugged like old friends even though we'd never met before. We spent 3 hours going through everything, comparing timelines, looking at photos, finding the gaps where he'd switched between us. The level of planning was honestly disturbing. He had separate social media accounts, separate friend groups. He'd built 2 entirely different lives and managed to keep them from colliding for over a year. Then, Natalie had an idea. She said Derek was supposed to come over to her apartment that night. Her apartment that he'd convinced her they shared, even though he'd never actually moved in, just kept clothes there. She suggested we both be there when he arrived. I agreed immediately. We spent the rest of the afternoon planning, decided we wouldn't yell or make a scene. Would just calmly present the facts and watch him try to explain his way out of the impossible situation he'd created. That evening, we sat in Natalie's living room and waited. She'd texted him earlier saying she was making dinner. He'd responded with a heart emoji and said he'd be there at 7. He walked in at 7:05, carrying flowers, completely relaxed. Saw me sitting on the couch next to Natalie and literally froze mid-step. The flowers dropped to the floor. He tried to play it off. Started with Olivia. What are you doing here? Like, this was some wild coincidence. Like maybe I'd randomly shown up at his other fiance's apartment by accident. Natalie stood up, held out her hand, said, "Give me the ring back, Derek." I stood up too, held out my hand, said, "Yeah, I want mine back too." The look on his face was almost worth the betrayal. Almost. He tried to talk, started several sentences and couldn't finish any of them. Tried to explain, but there was no explanation that made sense. We didn't let him speak. Natalie told him she knew about me. I told him I knew about her. We told him we knew about the money he'd borrowed from both of us. Told him we'd compared notes and figured out his entire scheme. He tried a different approach. Started apologizing. Said he loved us both. Said he'd made mistakes, but his feelings were real. Said he could explain everything if we just gave him a chance. Natalie cut him off. Said we're going to the police for fraud. You borrowed money from both of us under false pretenses. That's a crime, I added, and we have everything documented. Every text, every photo, every lie. Derek's face went from apologetic to panicked. He tried to bargain. Said he'd pay us back. Said he'd do whatever we wanted. Just please don't go to the police. We didn't answer. Just stood there holding out our hands, waiting for the rings. He took them off slowly, placed one in each of our palms. They were identical. Same style, same stone. He'd probably bought them in bulk. Then Natalie and I walked past him and out of her apartment. Left him standing there alone with his flowers on the floor and his double life completely exposed. We got coffee afterward. Laughed about the absurdity of it all even though we were both crying. Made plans to actually go to the police in the morning. Exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch. But I had one more move to make. That night, I created a TikTok account, posted a video explaining the whole story, showed screenshots of the proposal video, photos of Derek with both of us, proof of the money he'd borrowed. I didn't use his last name, but I used his first name and the company he worked for. Ended the video with a warning to anyone else who might be dating a guy who seems too good to be true. The video blew up. 4 million views in 3 days. Comments flooded in from people sharing their own stories, people who recognized Derek, people who'd been through similar situations. It was validating and horrifying at the same time. Derek's employer saw it. His face was clear enough in the screenshots that they identified him immediately. They fired him within a week for reputation damage and conduct unbecoming. Apparently, when you work in sales, having a viral video about your fraud and deception isn't great for the company image. He tried to reach out to both of us after that. Long apologetic texts, voice messages begging us to take down the video. threats of lawsuits that never materialized. We blocked him on everything. Natalie and I did report him to the police. They said it was hard to prosecute since we'd technically given him the money willingly, but they documented everything in case he tried this with someone else. At least there's a paper trail now. It's been 4 months. Natalie and I actually became friends through all this. We get coffee every couple weeks, laugh about how we both dodged a massive bullet. She's dating someone new now, taking things slow. I'm focusing on myself, trying to rebuild trust in my own judgment. The engagement ring is in a drawer somewhere. I can't bring myself to sell it yet. Maybe someday. For now, it's just a reminder that some people are really good at pretending to be someone they're not. I still can't believe he pulled it off for as long as he did. 2 fiancés, 2 complete relationships, 2 separate lives running parallel to each other. The logistics alone must have been exhausting. People ask me if I saw red flags. Honestly, no. Derek was attentive when he was with me, remembered important dates, seemed genuinely invested in our future. The only thing that seemed off was his occasional unavailability, but he always had reasonable explanations. Work, family, normal life stuff. Nothing that screamed he's living a double life. That's the scary part. He wasn't some obviously shady character. He was charming, successful, the kind of guy your friends approve of and your parents love. And underneath that, he was running a con that would have continued indefinitely if that proposal video hadn't gone viral. Double proposals are one thing, but what about when the person you trust in an emergency isn't who you thought they were? I got the call at 2 in the afternoon. Rachel had been in a car accident. Nothing serious, the nurse said, just a fender bender. But they were keeping her for observation because she'd hit her head. They told me which hospital, which room. I left work immediately, drove faster than I should have, parked illegally because I didn't care about the ticket. I walked into a hospital room expecting to find Rachel alone, maybe a little banged up, probably annoyed about the whole situation. Instead, I found her in the bed with another man sitting in the chair next to her, holding her hand. The guy looked up when I walked in. Mid-30s, decent looking, wearing the kind of concerned expression you'd expect from someone visiting their girlfriend in the hospital. He didn't let go of Rachel's hand. Rachel saw me and her face went completely white. Not pale from the accident, pale like someone who just realized they'd been caught. The nurse was still in the room checking vitals. She smiled at me and said, "Oh good, more visitors." Then she gestured to the guy and said to Rachel, "Your boyfriend got here so fast, he must have been worried sick." I looked at Rachel. She looked at the guy. The guy looked confused. Nobody said anything for a second that felt like an hour. I asked who he was. The guy stood up, still looking confused, and introduced himself as Ethan. Said he got a call from the hospital about Rachel's accident since he was her emergency contact. He said it so casually, like that was a completely normal thing. Like I should obviously know who he was. Rachel finally found her voice. Started stammering something about how this was awkward, how she could explain. The nurse, sensing the tension, quietly excused herself and left us alone. I asked again, "Who is Ethan?" Rachel said he was her ex. They dated before me, broke up 2 years ago, and she'd just forgotten to update her emergency contact information. Simple mistake. Nothing suspicious. Ethan was just being nice by coming to check on her. Ethan looked even more confused now. He asked Rachel what she was talking about, asked why she was acting like they weren't together. And here's where it gets absurd. I turned to Ethan and asked him directly what his relationship with Rachel was. He said they'd been back together for 4 months, that they'd rekindled things at a mutual friend's party and had been dating ever since. He asked me who I was and why I was here. Rachel started talking fast, said Ethan was confused, maybe delusional, that they'd hung out a few times as friends, but definitely weren't together. She looked at me with these desperate eyes and said, "Kevin, you have to believe me." I didn't believe her, because the math didn't work. I'd been dating Rachel for 7 months. If Ethan was telling the truth about 4 months, that meant she'd been seeing both of us for most of our relationship. I asked if I could see her phone. Rachel hesitated but handed it over, probably thinking she'd deleted anything incriminating. But she hadn't. I found months of text conversations with Ethan, pet names, inside jokes, regular check-ins about their days, and a text from just last week where Ethan said, "I love you," and Rachel replied with "love you too." I showed Rachel the screen. She said it was out of context, that they said that as friends, that it didn't mean anything romantic. Ethan was looking at Rachel like he'd never seen her before, like he was piecing together his own betrayal in real time. He asked her if she was seriously dating both of us. Rachel denied it again, voice getting higher and more frantic. I opened her email on the phone, found apartment listings, places for 2 bedrooms sent back and forth between Rachel and Ethan, with comments about which ones they liked, discussing lease terms and move-in dates. Emails from 3 weeks ago about viewing schedules. I held the phone up, asked Rachel to explain why she was apartment hunting with someone she claimed to barely talk to. She couldn't. Just sat there in that hospital bed, looking between me and Ethan, and I watched her realize there was no way to talk herself out of this one. No explanation that would make any of this okay. Ethan stood up, looked at Rachel with this expression of complete devastation, asked her if anything she'd told him over the last 4 months was true. She started crying, reaching for him, saying she could explain. He pulled away and walked out without another word. I should have followed him. Should have left right then. But I needed to hear her say it. Needed confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that what I'd just discovered was real. I asked Rachel directly if she'd been dating both of us. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, said she didn't mean for it to happen, that she and Ethan had reconnected and she still had feelings for him, but she had feelings for me too, and she didn't know how to choose. So she just didn't choose, kept both relationships going, kept both of us in the dark, maintained completely separate lives with 2 different men who both thought they were in exclusive relationships with her. The audacity of it was almost impressive. I put her phone on the bedside table, told her we were done. She grabbed my arm, begging me to stay, to talk about this, to give her a chance to explain properly. I pulled away and walked out of that hospital room without looking back. I blocked her on everything: phone, social media, email, complete shutdown. Drove home feeling numb and angry and stupid all at once. How had I not seen this? Were there signs I missed? Red flags I ignored? I went over everything in my head. The times she said she was busy and couldn't hang out. The weekends she claimed she had family obligations. The way she kept our relationship mostly private on social media. All of it made sense now. All of it was coordinated to keep Ethan and me from ever overlapping. 3 days later, Rachel showed up at my apartment. I only knew because my neighbor texted me that my ex-girlfriend was sitting in the hallway crying. I went down and found her outside my door, eyes red and puffy, looking completely wrecked. She said she needed to talk to me, that she'd been confused and scared and didn't know what she wanted. She said she'd thought that keeping her options open was smart, that she was just trying to protect herself from getting hurt again. She apologized for lying but said she never meant to hurt anyone. I told her she'd made her choice when she decided to date 2 people without telling either of them. That choice had consequences, and now she'd lost both of us because neither one wanted to be with someone who'd lie that thoroughly for that long. She asked if there was any chance we could try again, start over, build something honest this time. I said no, told her I hoped she figured out whatever she needed to figure out, but it wouldn't be with me. Then I went back inside my apartment and shut the door. I heard her crying in the hallway for a few minutes before she finally left. Ethan reached out to me a week later, found me on social media and sent a message. He apologized for the hospital situation, said he'd had no idea I existed. We talked for a bit, compared timelines, realized just how elaborately Rachel had been juggling both relationships. He'd thought her busy schedule was because of work stress. I'd thought it was family stuff. She'd carefully constructed explanations for both of us that kept us from ever questioning her availability. Ethan and I aren't friends or anything, but we have this weird solidarity now. Both of us got played by the same person in the same way. Both of us trusted someone who didn't deserve it. It's been 2 months. I'm doing okay. Dating again, casually, being a lot more cautious about who I trust. Rachel tried reaching out a few more times, but I never responded. Eventually she stopped. I don't know if she's still trying to contact Ethan. Don't really care. That's his business. What I do know is that I dodged a bullet. If she'd been more careful, if I hadn't shown up at that hospital at the exact wrong time, I might have ended up engaged to someone who was living an entire secret life. The emergency contact was what exposed everything. This one small detail she'd forgotten to cover. People asked if I was angry. I was at first. But mostly I just felt sad. Sad that someone I'd cared about was capable of that level of deception. Sad that she'd wasted months of my life on a relationship that was never real. Sad that she'd hurt Ethan the same way and probably didn't lose much sleep over it. But I'm not sad anymore. I'm just glad I found out when I did. Glad the nurse made that one comment about her boyfriend being there fast. Glad I trusted my gut enough to ask questions instead of accepting Rachel's immediate explanations. Emergency contacts don't lie. People do. And Rachel had been lying to both of us for long enough that she probably started believing her own stories. Emergency contacts don't lie. People do. But what about when the lies aren't hidden in phones or hospitals? They're hidden in songs. I was setting up music for our dinner party when I accidentally stumbled onto something that would destroy my marriage. We were hosting Josh's co-workers and their partners. Nothing fancy, just wine and appetizers and good conversation. I'd grabbed Josh's phone to connect to our speaker system because mine was charging upstairs. I opened Spotify and was about to pull up our usual dinner party playlist when I noticed a private playlist I'd never seen before, just titled J, One Letter. I almost scrolled past it, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked. The first song was Jesse's Girl by Rick Springfield, then You Belong With Me by Taylor Swift, then Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls. I kept scrolling. Every single song was about longing, about wanting someone you can't have, about forbidden desire and unrequited love and loving someone from a distance. My sister's name is Julie. I stood there in our kitchen with Josh's phone in my hand, the dinner party starting in 20 minutes, and felt my entire world tilt sideways. This was a playlist my husband had made, private, hidden, full of songs about wanting someone named Jay. I could hear Josh upstairs getting ready, completely unaware that I'd just found this. Part of me wanted to pretend I hadn't seen it, put the phone down, play our normal playlist, get through the dinner party, deal with this later or never. But I couldn't. I screenshotted the playlist, sent it to myself. Then I went upstairs. Josh was in the bathroom fixing his hair. I walked in and held up his phone, asked him what the J playlist was about. He looked at the screen and his face went completely pale. Didn't try to play dumb or make excuses, just stared at me with this expression of pure dread. I asked again, "What is this, Josh?" He sat down on the edge of the bathtub, took a breath, and then he told me he'd had feelings for Julie for years, since before we got married, said he'd never acted on them. Said the playlist was just his way of processing emotions he couldn't express. Said it didn't mean anything, was just songs, just a stupid coping mechanism. I asked him why he married me if he had feelings for my sister. He said he loved me, said he chose me, said the feelings for Julie were just a crush he knew would never go anywhere, so he buried them and moved on. Buried them in a secret playlist, apparently. The dinner party happened. I don't know how I got through it. Just went into autopilot mode, smiled, made small talk, served food, pretended everything was fine while internally I was screaming. Josh played along. We were the perfect hosts. No one had any idea that our marriage was imploding in real time. After everyone left, we fought. Real fighting, the kind where everything you've ever held back comes pouring out. I told him making that playlist was acting on his feelings, that curating songs about wanting my sister was a betrayal even if he never physically touched her. He said I was overreacting, said they were just songs, said lots of people have crushes and it doesn't mean anything. I asked if Julie knew. He swore she didn't, said he'd never told her, never acted differently around her, never done anything to make her uncomfortable, said it was completely one-sided and completely in his head. I didn't believe him. The next day I called Julie, asked her to meet me for coffee. She could tell something was wrong immediately. I showed her the playlist, watched her face as she scrolled through the songs. She went very quiet. I asked if Josh had ever said anything to her, ever acted inappropriately, ever given any indication he had feelings. That's when everything unraveled. Julie put the phone down, started crying, and then she told me that Josh had kissed her at my bachelorette party 3 years ago, after I'd gone to bed. They'd been cleaning up together. He'd been drunk. He'd told her he was making a mistake marrying me, that he had feelings for her, that he thought maybe she felt the same way. She said she'd pushed him away immediately, told him he was drunk and being ridiculous, told him to never say anything like that again. And then she'd never told me because my wedding was 2 weeks away and she didn't want to ruin it. She thought it was just cold feet, thought he'd get over it, thought telling me would cause more harm than good. So she'd kept it secret for 3 years. Let me marry a man who'd confessed feelings for her. Let me build a life with someone who wanted my sister. I sat there in that coffee shop feeling like I didn't know anyone anymore. My husband had lied. My sister had lied. My entire marriage was built on a foundation of secrets and unspoken feelings and things people decided I was better off not knowing. Julie kept apologizing, said she thought she was protecting me, said she thought it was just a drunken mistake that didn't mean anything. I asked her if she had feelings for Josh. She swore she didn't, said she'd never seen him that way, said the kiss was completely one-sided and completely unwanted. I wanted to believe her, but I didn't know what to believe anymore. I went home and told Josh I knew about the kiss, watched his face confirm it before he even spoke. He tried to explain, said it was a mistake, said he was scared about getting married and panicked, said it meant nothing, but it did mean something. It meant he'd spent our entire marriage harboring feelings for my sister while pretending everything was fine. It meant he'd kissed her right before our wedding and never told me. It meant every family gathering, every holiday, every time Julie came over, he was standing there wanting something he couldn't have. And I was the consolation prize, the one he settled for because Julie rejected him. I filed for divorce the following week. Josh tried to fight it, said we could work through this, said he'd go to therapy, said he'd delete the playlist and cut off whatever feelings he had and focus entirely on us. I told him the truth that had been sitting in my chest since I found that playlist. I said, "You didn't choose me, Josh. You chose me because Julie said no, and I'm not interested in being someone's second choice." He didn't have an answer for that. Julie tried to repair our relationship, called, texted, showed up at my apartment, said she was sorry, said she should have told me sooner, said she never meant to hurt me. I told her she'd had 3 years to tell me the truth, and she'd chosen to let me marry someone who was in love with her. That wasn't protection. That was cowardice. I cut her off completely, blocked her number, unfollowed her on everything, told our parents I needed space from family gatherings. They didn't understand at first. I had to tell them the whole story. My mum was horrified. My dad wanted to kill Josh. Julie apparently moved out of state a few months later. I don't keep track anymore. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. I got the house. Josh got to keep his regrets. He's apparently dating someone new now. I genuinely hope it works out for him. Hope he's learned to be honest about his feelings instead of making secret playlists like some tragic romantic hero. As for me, I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm dating again, taking things slow, being very careful about red flags. Any hint that someone isn't being fully honest, and I'm out. Life's too short to be someone's backup plan. I still think about that playlist sometimes, about how something so small revealed something so massive, about how Josh spent years curating songs about wanting my sister while sleeping next to me every night. The level of compartmentalization required for that is honestly impressive in the worst way. Music reveals what words can't. People show you who they are in the little things they think don't matter. Playlists, likes on social media, the way they talk about other people. I ignored those signs because I wanted to believe in the version of Josh I'd fallen in love with, but that version was never real. It was just the part of himself he chose to show me, while hiding everything else. I don't hate him. I don't hate Julie. I'm just sad about the whole thing. Sad that people I loved chose to lie to me for years. Sad that I wasted time on a marriage that was doomed from the start. Sad that my relationship with my sister is probably permanently broken. But I'm also grateful. Grateful I found out before we had kids. Grateful I got out before wasting more years. Grateful for the clarity that comes from seeing someone's truth, even when it destroys everything you thought you knew. The dinner party playlist I ended up using that night, I deleted it. Too many memories. These days I make my own playlists. No hidden meanings, no secret messages. Just songs I actually like. It's simpler that way. Music reveals what words can't. But if you think playlists are damning, wait until you hear about the kind of evidence that shows up in group chats. I was sitting in the back of the conference room during our quarterly all-hands meeting when Bethany's entire career imploded in real time. And honestly, I had a front row seat to the most spectacular professional disaster I've ever witnessed. Bethany was presenting the Q3 marketing results. She'd been with the company for just over a year, but had somehow skyrocketed up the ranks faster than anyone I'd ever seen. Junior coordinator to senior manager in 12 months. It didn't make sense to those of us who'd been grinding away for years, but management kept praising her exceptional work ethic and innovative ideas. She was mid-presentation, screen shared to the projector, so all 60 employees could see her slides, when a Slack notification popped up in the top right corner of her screen, from Richard Chen, our CEO. The message preview was crystal clear on that massive projector screen. Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear the red dress. The room went completely silent, like someone had pressed a mute button on reality. Everyone just stared at the projection screen. Bethany's face went from professional presenter to absolute panic in under a second. She lunged for her laptop and slammed it shut, but the damage was catastrophically done. Someone had already taken a photo. I heard the camera shutter sound from at least 3 different phones around me. The meeting dissolved into chaos. People started whispering immediately. Bethany grabbed her laptop and practically ran out of the conference room. Our VP of Operations tried to resume the presentation with his own slides, but nobody was paying attention anymore. The entire company had just witnessed what looked very much like evidence of an affair between our married CEO and a rapidly promoted employee. And here's the thing that made it so much worse. Richard's wife, Patricia, worked in our accounting department. She'd been at the company for 15 years. She was in that conference room. I watched her face go from confused to understanding to absolutely devastated in the span of about 10 seconds. Patricia stood up, walked out without saying a word, and didn't come back. By lunch, HR had called an emergency meeting. By end of day, they'd launched a full investigation. And what they found was so much worse than anyone expected. Bethany and Richard had been having an affair for over a year. It started about 2 months after she was hired as a junior coordinator. The email trails were damning, personal messages sent from company accounts, expense reports for hotel rooms during supposed business trips that only the two of them attended, calendar invites for private meetings in his office that happened way too frequently to be legitimate work discussions. But that wasn't even the worst part. The investigation revealed that every single promotion Bethany received was directly authorized by Richard, often overruling recommendations from actual department heads. She'd gotten 3 raises in 1 year, bonuses for exceptional work that other employees in her department never received despite having better metrics. Projects were reassigned to her even when other people had already done most of the work. I'd been passed over for a promotion to senior manager twice in the past year. Both times, Bethany got the role instead. Both times, I was told she had shown more initiative and leadership potential. Now I knew why. It had nothing to do with initiative. It had everything to do with who she was sleeping with. The other women in marketing were livid. We'd all been working our tails off while Bethany got ahead by having an affair with the CEO. Every late night we'd stayed to finish projects. Every weekend we'd worked. Every idea we'd pitched that got ignored while Bethany's mediocre suggestions got greenlit. It all made sense now. Patricia filed for divorce within a week. But she didn't stop there. She also threatened to sue the company for creating a hostile work environment and allowing the affair to continue unchecked. Her lawyer argued that the company's lack of oversight had enabled Richard to abuse his power and had created an unfair workplace for everyone else. The board went into emergency damage control mode. They couldn't afford a lawsuit, couldn't afford the PR nightmare, and definitely couldn't afford to keep a CEO who'd been caught having an affair with a subordinate and giving her preferential treatment with company resources. Richard was forced to resign. They tried to spin it as him stepping down to focus on family, but everyone knew the truth. The severance package he got was probably generous, but his reputation was destroyed. LinkedIn updated within hours. Former CEO became the most honest job title he'd ever had. Bethany was fired for ethics violations. The termination letter cited inappropriate relationship with a superior, misuse of company resources, and accepting promotions and bonuses obtained through unethical means. She tried to fight it, claimed it was consensual, and therefore nobody's business. HR pointed out that consent doesn't matter when there's a massive power imbalance and company resources are being misused. She posted this long rant on LinkedIn about cancel culture and how a private relationship was being used to destroy her career, about how women are always punished more harshly than men in these situations, about how she was being made a scapegoat. The comments section tore her apart, people pointing out that she'd accepted promotions she didn't earn, while other qualified candidates got passed over, that she'd benefited financially from an affair with a married man whose wife worked at the same company, that this wasn't about cancel culture, it was about consequences for unethical behavior. She deleted the post after a few hours, but screenshots live forever. Someone had already shared it to a workplace drama forum, where it got absolutely ratioed into oblivion. Meanwhile, HR finally offered me the senior manager position I'd been passed over for twice. They apologized for the oversight, said my work had always been exemplary, and gave me a raise that was actually competitive with market rates. Better late than never, I guess, but the whole thing left a bitter taste. The company settled with Patricia out of court. Undisclosed amount, but rumor was it was substantial. She quit shortly after, took the settlement money, and started her own consulting firm. Good for her, honestly. She deserved better than working somewhere that had enabled her husband's affair for over a year. Things went from bad to unhinged when the details kept emerging. Apparently, Richard had done this before. At his previous company, different subordinate, same pattern. Affair, promotions, eventual discovery, quiet resignation. We'd never known because his previous company had kept it under wraps with NDAs and settlements. Our board looked like absolute fools for not doing a better background check, for not seeing the red flags, for creating an environment where a CEO could abuse his power this blatantly without anyone noticing or stopping it. The company brought in new leadership, a woman this time, with a strict policy about workplace relationships and regular ethics training. They implemented anonymous reporting systems and third-party HR oversight, closing the barn door after the horses had escaped, but at least they were trying. I ran into Bethany once, months later at a coffee shop. She looked different, tired, less polished. She saw me and looked like she might say something, but then just looked away. I didn't approach her, didn't gloat or confront her, just got my coffee and left. She'd destroyed her own career. She didn't need me to rub it in. The whole situation was a masterclass in how not to conduct yourself professionally. Richard abused his power. Bethany took advantage of that power for personal gain. Both of them made choices that hurt other people, Patricia most of all, but also every employee who'd worked hard and played by the rules while watching someone else cheat their way to the top. People still talk about it at work sometimes, usually when warning new hires about maintaining professional boundaries. The incident has become company legend. That time someone's affair got exposed via screen share during an all-hands meeting. That time the CEO and his affair partner both got fired in the same week. That time one Slack notification destroyed multiple careers simultaneously. I got my promotion, got my raise, finally got the recognition I'd earned, but the satisfaction was muted by the whole mess. I'd wanted to succeed on my own merits, not because the person ahead of me got caught sleeping with the boss. At least now when I go to work, I know the playing field is more level, that promotions are based on actual performance, that the new CEO isn't going to play favorites with whoever they're having an affair with. It's a low bar, but after everything that happened, I'll take it. Corporate affairs are messy, but at least they usually stay behind closed doors until someone decides to make them everyone's business. I've lived in my house for 8 years, followed all the HOA rules, kept my lawn maintained, painted my shutters the approved colors, never caused problems. I'm the kind of neighbor who waves, who helps carry groceries, who loans out tools. Just a normal guy trying to live a quiet life. Then Paul moved in next door 2 years ago, and my peace ended. Paul was one of those neighbors who treated the HOA rulebook like it was scripture. The kind of guy who measured other people's grass height with a ruler and reported violations with the enthusiasm of someone who'd finally found their life's purpose. Within his first month, he'd reported 3 different neighbors for minor infractions. A trash can left out too long, a garden gnome that was apparently against community standards, a basketball hoop positioned 6 inches over the property line. I tried to be friendly at first, introduced myself, offered to help him move furniture, invited him to a neighborhood barbecue. He was polite but cold, made it clear he wasn't interested in being buddies, just wanted everyone to follow the rules. Fine, I could respect that. I followed the rules anyway, but then he started targeting me specifically. First citation was for leaving my trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day. I'd forgotten to bring them in after work. Got a formal warning letter from the HOA. Second citation was for my mailbox being a quarter-inch out of alignment with community standards. I had to pay someone to adjust it. Third citation was the one that made me snap. Lawn violations. My grass was allegedly half an inch too tall according to HOA regulations. Paul had measured it, photographed it, filed a formal complaint. I got a citation that came with a fine if I didn't remedy the situation within 48 hours. Half an inch. This man had measured my grass and reported me for half an inch. I mowed my lawn that same day, paid the citation fee, and decided that Paul had made an enemy. I'm not usually a vengeful person. I don't like drama. I prefer to live and let live. But there's something about someone weaponizing bureaucracy against you that just triggers a special kind of anger. Paul wasn't reporting me because I was actually causing problems. He was doing it because he could, because he enjoyed it, because making other people's lives harder gave him some sad sense of power. So I started paying attention, watching, waiting for Paul to slip up in some way that I could use against him. It took about 3 weeks before I noticed something odd. Paul's car wasn't in his driveway one Tuesday night. His wife's car was there. The house lights were on, but his car was gone. Not unusual on its own. Maybe he was working late. Maybe he went to the gym. But then I noticed it again on Thursday, and the following Tuesday, and Thursday again, always the same 2 nights, always gone from around 8 p.m. until early morning. I got curious, took a walk around the neighborhood one Tuesday night and found Paul's car parked 3 streets over, right outside a house I knew belonged to a woman named Sandra. She'd gotten divorced about a year ago, lived alone, kept to herself mostly, and apparently was hosting my married neighbor twice a week. I started documenting, took photos with timestamps showing Paul's car parked outside Sandra's house, wrote down dates and times, built a pattern over 2 weeks, Tuesday and Thursday nights, every single week. His car would be there from around 8 until 5 or 6 in the morning. Then he'd drive home, park in his own driveway, and go about his day like nothing happened. His wife had no idea. I'd see her leaving for work in the mornings while Paul was still at Sandra's house, see her coming home in the evenings before Paul left. She was completely oblivious to the fact that her husband was living a double life on a very predictable schedule. And here's where it gets absurd. Our HOA has a monthly newsletter. Just neighborhood updates, upcoming events, reminders about rules. It also has a section for anonymous community concerns. Residents can submit issues they want addressed without putting their name on it. Usually it's things like requests for better street lighting or complaints about speeding cars. I submitted a community concern, wrote it very carefully, said there was a married resident conducting an extramarital affair and using HOA streets for secret parking, which created security concerns since unfamiliar cars were regularly parked overnight in areas without proper resident identification. I included enough specific details that anyone paying attention would know exactly who I was talking about. The street name, the time pattern, the fact that it was a married male resident. But I never used Paul's name, never identified Sandra, just laid out the facts and let people draw their own conclusions. The newsletter went out on a Saturday. By Sunday afternoon, the neighborhood group chat was buzzing. People had figured out who the married resident was. Paul's wife Michelle apparently saw the newsletter and immediately checked their car's GPS history. Modern cars track everything. She found months of trips to Sandra's address, confronted Paul that same day. I was working in my garage when I heard the screaming. Michelle's voice carrying through their open windows. Paul trying to defend himself, doors slamming, more yelling. Then Paul walking out with a duffel bag and driving away. Michelle kicked him out, changed the locks within a week, filed for divorce within 2. The whole neighborhood knew the story. Paul had been having an affair with Sandra for nearly a year, twice a week, like clockwork, and he'd gotten away with it until some anonymous concerned resident decided to raise a security issue. Paul came back a few times to get his stuff, always when Michelle wasn't home. I made sure to be outside working on my lawn those days, made eye contact, gave him a friendly wave and smile. He'd glare at me. He suspected I was behind the newsletter submission, but he had no proof. And honestly, what was he going to do? Report me to the HOA for exposing his affair? The irony was delicious. Paul moved out completely within a month. Michelle stayed in the house. She actually became friendly after that. Apologized for Paul's behavior. Said she'd had no idea he was filing all those complaints against neighbors. Said he'd always been controlling, but she didn't realize how bad it had gotten. My lawn violation stopped. Shockingly, with Paul gone, no one else seemed to care if my grass was occasionally half an inch over regulation height. The HOA citations dried up. I went back to living my quiet life in peace. Paul and Sandra apparently didn't last. Once the affair became public knowledge and Paul was divorced, whatever excitement had fueled their relationship fizzled out. Last I heard, Paul moved to a different neighborhood entirely. Probably found a new HOA to terrorize. Sandra still lives in the neighborhood. We're cordial when we see each other. She knows I'm the one who exposed the affair. Made a comment about it once at the grocery store. Said it was a messy way to find out her relationship was ending, but probably saved her from wasting more time. She doesn't seem to hold a grudge. People asked if I felt bad about destroying Paul's marriage and publicly humiliating him. Honestly, not really. Paul chose to have an affair. Paul chose to lie to his wife. Paul chose to use neighborhood streets for his secret parking. I just chose to point out a legitimate security concern to the HOA. If he'd been a decent neighbor, if he hadn't spent 6 months harassing me over grass height and mailbox angles, maybe I wouldn't have been paying such close attention to his movements. The thing about weaponizing rules against people is that it only works if you're following them yourself. Paul forgot that. Thought he could measure everyone else's compliance while living however he wanted. But scrutiny goes both ways. When you make yourself someone's problem, you better make sure your own life can withstand examination. My grass grows in peace now. Sometimes it gets a little tall. Sometimes I forget to bring my trash cans in right away. No one cares. No one measures. No one files complaints. It's amazing how much more pleasant life is when your neighbors aren't actively trying to make it harder. I still see Michelle around. She seems happier. Started dating someone new a few months ago. Repainted her shutters a color that's probably not HOA approved, but no one's reported it. She waves when she sees me. Sometimes we chat about the weather or upcoming neighborhood events. It's nice, normal. The way neighbors are supposed to be. Paul's probably measuring someone else's grass somewhere, finding new violations to report, living his best petty life. But he's not doing it here. And that makes my half-inch, too-tall grass feel like a small victory. Never underestimate a man with a grudge and a camera phone. But pettiness is one thing. What about when someone's entire career gets stolen right out from under them? Getting fired was supposed to be the worst thing that happened to me that year. Turns out it was just the opening act. I'd been working at a mid-sized marketing agency for 3 years. Started as a junior strategist, worked my way up to senior role, consistently hit my targets, sometimes exceeded them. My performance reviews were always solid. My clients liked me. My campaigns performed well. I thought I was doing everything right. Then Scott became my manager. He was brought in from outside the company, had this impressive resume, talked a big game in meetings. At first, things seemed fine. He'd check in on my projects, offer feedback, seem generally supportive. But over time, I noticed he was getting more involved in the details of my work, asking for copies of all my strategy documents, wanting to be CC'd on every client email, sitting in on calls that didn't really require his presence. I thought he was just being thorough, micromanaging a bit, sure, but some managers are like that. I didn't think much of it. Then 6 months into his tenure, he called me into his office and told me I was being let go. Said my performance had been declining, that clients were unhappy, that the company needed to go in a different direction. I was blindsided. My last review had been positive. My campaigns were performing above benchmarks. Nothing he said matched my reality. I asked for specifics. He gave vague answers about metrics and team dynamics. Said it wasn't personal, just business. HR was there, handed me a severance package, walked me out that afternoon. Standard corporate firing procedure. Cold, efficient, humiliating. I signed the paperwork because I needed the severance. Spent the next 2 months sending out resumes, going to interviews, trying to figure out what went wrong, questioning everything I thought I knew about my abilities. Then I got a message from Marcus, a former coworker who still worked at the agency. He sent me a link to Scott's LinkedIn with a message that just said, "Dude, you need to see this." I clicked the link. Scott had posted a long case study about a campaign that increased client revenue by 40%. He detailed the strategy, the execution, the innovative approaches that led to such impressive results. He positioned himself as the creative mind behind this success story. Companies were commenting, congratulating him, asking if he was open to new opportunities. The campaign he was describing was mine. Every single detail, the strategy I'd developed, the client I'd managed, the results I'd achieved. He'd taken my work, word for word in some sections, and presented it as his own accomplishment. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't just taking credit for a team effort. This was outright plagiarism of work I'd done entirely on my own, presented to the world as his personal achievement, and he'd fired me so I wouldn't be around to call him out on it. The audacity was genuinely stunning. I went through my files. I'm obsessive about documentation, always have been. I had every email related to that campaign, every draft of the strategy document with timestamps, client feedback addressed to me directly, performance reports with my name on them. I had a paper trail that proved beyond any doubt that this was my work, not Scott's. I contacted a lawyer, explained the situation. She helped me draft a cease and desist letter demanding Scott remove the post, issue a public correction, and compensate me for using my intellectual work without permission. We attached a comprehensive evidence packet. Every email, every document, every timestamp made it impossible to deny. I sent it to Scott and CC'd HR and the company's legal department. The response came within 24 hours. HR wanted to meet. They offered a settlement, a decent amount of money, and an NDA that would prevent me from ever discussing what happened. They framed it as a win-win. I get compensated, they avoid negative publicity, everyone moves on. I said no, because this wasn't just about me getting paid. This was about Scott facing actual consequences for stealing my work and destroying my reputation. An NDA would let him keep that LinkedIn post up, would let him continue benefiting from my work while I stayed silent, would let him do this to someone else down the line. So instead, I posted my own LinkedIn story, detailed exactly what happened, showed side-by-side comparisons, my original emails from 2 years ago next to Scott's recent post using identical language, strategy documents with my name and timestamps next to his claims of personal innovation, client testimonials addressed to me next to his assertions that he'd managed the relationship. I kept it factual, professional, just laid out the evidence and let people draw their own conclusions. Ended with a simple statement: I'm all for collaboration and shared success, but taking sole credit for someone else's work while simultaneously firing them crosses a line. I posted it and then closed my laptop. Figured maybe a few hundred people would see it. Maybe some former colleagues would comment supportively. Maybe it would feel cathartic, even if nothing actually changed. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. The post went viral, started with people in the marketing industry sharing it. Then it spread to broader professional networks. People started commenting with their own stories of managers stealing credit. The engagement kept climbing, thousands of views, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Scott's post got flooded with comments calling him out, people asking if he had a response to the allegations, people tagging his company, people sharing my post directly in his comments. He deleted his original post within a few hours, but screenshots existed everywhere by then. His company's PR team went into crisis mode. They posted a statement about taking plagiarism seriously and conducting a thorough investigation. But the damage was done. The internet had already convicted Scott in the court of public opinion. He was fired 48 hours after my post went live. The company released a statement saying they'd concluded their investigation and terminated his employment due to ethics violations. They didn't name me specifically, but everyone knew what they were referring to. But it didn't stop there. Scott had been interviewing at other companies, had several offers pending. I started getting messages from recruiters at those companies asking if I could verify my claims. Apparently, they'd seen my post and wanted to vet their potential hire. I sent them the same evidence packet I'd sent to my lawyer. Every company rescinded their offers within the week. Scott's carefully constructed career, built partially on stolen work, collapsed completely. Then my inbox started filling with actual job offers, companies in marketing and advertising reaching out. Some had seen my work in the evidence I'd posted and were impressed. Some just liked that I'd stood up for myself publicly. I had multiple interviews within days, several offers within 2 weeks. I accepted a position at a company that offered me more money than Scott had been making as a manager. Better title too. The irony was delicious. My first paycheck was substantial. I used part of it to do something petty and perfect. I bought a billboard, put it right outside my old agency's office building where Scott used to work. Big, professional looking design with simple text. Hire people who do the work, not people who steal it. It stayed up for a month. I have photos. It's still one of my proudest moments. Scott tried to salvage his reputation, posted an apology on LinkedIn, acknowledging he'd made mistakes, and was committed to learning and growing. The comments were brutal. People don't forgive plagiarism easily, especially when you fired the person whose work you stole. Last I heard, he'd left marketing entirely, working in some completely different industry under a different name on social media. Can't blame him, honestly. His professional reputation was thoroughly destroyed, and he did it to himself. As for me, I'm thriving. The new job is great. My work is recognized and appreciated. I've built a professional network that actually supports me. And I learned a valuable lesson about standing up for yourself, even when it seems easier to just take the money and stay quiet. That billboard cost me a few $1,000s, worth every penny, because it wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message, about refusing to let someone else profit from my work while I stayed silent, about making sure other people knew what kind of person Scott really was. People ask if I regret going public instead of taking the settlement. Not for a second. The money would have been nice, sure, but watching Scott's carefully constructed facade crumble while my career actually improved, that was priceless. The truth came out. Justice was served, and I got a better job in the process. Sometimes the universe actually rewards you for doing the right thing. And there you have it, 15 stories of betrayal, revenge, and the messy, chaotic truths that unravel when secrets finally surface. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're officially part of the club. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, the truth always comes out eventually, so you might as well control the narrative. See you in the next one.